You're listening to episode 211 of the Comics Pals. We're a group of comic book journalists and friends who record a podcast together because we don't talk enough about comics in our daily lives.
You know what, guys? I think Marco's pretty sus. I think we gotta throw him overboard here.
You know who's pretty sus?
Hold on,
no, Cale, wait, sit down a second.
regular
Hold on.
imposter amongst
no.
us.
You know what was frustrating is building up for like an hour and a half, getting really hyped, really excited, just for some what's the word? Shithead to be like, oh, you know what? Marco's sus. Orange is sus. Kick Orange out. Orange. I was like, bro, what the fuck did I even do? I was sitting here, and people believe him.
Last
Marco,
night,
quickly,
in our Discord. Go ahead.
Would you hit Command W and just we just need you to verify who you are
That's
real
right.
quick. Command W.
I was in the scanner, bro.
Any just landing for you either, Sean, or?
Hold on, I'm about to explain. Last night in our Discord and on Twitch, we played Among Us for the first time. Sean and Pete weren't there. For an hour and a half, Marco kept saying he wanted to play as the imposter in the popular game Among Us. And with no evidence, in the very first of our first round of our last game, I convinced everyone that Marco was the imposter. I didn't know if he was or not. I just wanted to have him thrown overboard. And it turned out he was.
And it worked.
The entire time, Marco kept saying he's so good as the imposter in Among Us. And frankly, we'll never know if that's true because I ruined his game.
You just staged a coup.
Nice. Good.
It was the best. I was crying laughing.
Terrible.
I was so suspicious too. I was just like, oh yeah, orange. That was his color. He's the imposter. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If he's not, throw me overboard.
These are the kinds of hijinks that you're missing out on when you don't tune into our streams. So you must make time for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Go give us a follow. Twitch.tv/TheComicsPals.
Even if you didn't know about it, I didn't know it was going to happen until it happened, and I was in there.
Be ready. It's a surprise.
That's right. It could happen at any moment.
It could be you thrown overboard for no reason.
So it's been a long week. If you're listening in America, we've got an election going on, and I'm thinking it might drag out as long as it took for us to get the New Mutants movie.
Oh God! Don't fucking say that.
Timely reference.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a while, but hey,
It's been a
one
while.
thing you can always count on time, is this podcast. And we thank you for joining us. We thank you for tuning in. All 5 of us are here, which is,
Disappointing.
irregular. Oh. Now we went from just Cale and I last week to the whole band.
I'm going to say it is crowded in here today. I was enjoying the stretching room last week. We had an hour-long discussion about Tokusatsu.
Oh.
That went great.
See, I mean, I got a message from Sean right after the show. He's like, "You can't leave me alone with Cale ever again, please."
Well, that we expected.
That's weird. I got a different message from Sean that said, please don't come back again.
Hey, this isn't the political pals, but I just got on CNN.com.
Joe
They're
Biden
giving
won.
the election to Biden. Yeah,
What's
Biden.
up? Live on the air, baby.
Live on the air. Yeah.
I got the same notification.
Wilson Fisk outed.
I can't believe senile Lazy Joe or Sleepy Joe. That's what he called. Wilson Fisk has been calling him Sleepy Joe. He beat him. That's crazy.
Oh man, that is congratulations. Congratulations.
Thanks. Oh,
America.
People are cheering outside.
Yeah.
Wait, really?
yo,
Yeah, they're
'cause you
doing
don't
the
hear that
cans right now.
pan? Yeah.
people
Yeah,
have
that
been
was-
taking the streets in Philly celebrating like crazy.
Yeah.
It's like the end of Return of the Jedi, where everyone's celebrating the death of the Emperor.
Oh man, wow, this is pretty cool.
Wild.
Feels good, man.
It's
Feels
funny
pretty good.
because Cale's lived in England a bunch, and they failed to oust their Trump. So America wins again.
Of course.
So who's the canonical president now for the Comics Pals?
Who's the comic Joe Biden?
That's a question.
All right, so if Kingpin just was defeated, then who would have defeated him?
Does it have to be Marvel?
Well, no, he was our president. Oh,
The
I
other-
see what you mean.
Yeah.
No, I guess
No,
not.
comic books.
I think I hear people like banging pans in the
yeah.
background.
It's out my
they are.
window, yeah.
Yeah, that's it right now. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
The other thing too is, are we talking about who defeated him, or are we talking about who's stepping up in his place?
I would say who's stepping up in his place, because I had an idea for Jay Garrick.
Jake Garrick is good, Marco. I like that.
He's an old man,
Yeah,
not as quick on his feet anymore.
that's right. Sometimes he forgets where he is.
I was gonna say Alan Scott, and there's a parallax joke in
Yep.
there somewhere, but
Oh yeah.
There sure isn't. There sure isn't. There is not. Nope.
Alan Scott was
That
definitely
is
never paralyzed.
Completely wrong. So,
I kind of.
hang on. Let me. Pete, I'm gonna humor you. Let me open the box.
hit
Let me
yeah.
see.
Yeah.
No, this motherfucker's empty.
Oh, good, great.
All right. So
Killed that joke.
I like Ted Grant, Wildcat, because Joe always feels like he's an old man ready to punch someone. This is a bunch of malarkey. Ted Grant
not
is
bad.
the Wildcat from
Ooh,
Justice Society.
I got it. Ma Hunkle, the original Red Tornado,
No,
got the pot on her head and everything.
not loving it. So let me let you guys know where you can find us all over the web before we continue with the bad jokes. Of course, we're the Comics Pals. You type that into your Google machine, and inevitably you will find us on social media. We're the Comics Pals, so you can come chat with us. You can ask us for a follow. We'll follow you back, maybe. You can write to us at thecomicspals@gmail.com. That's with an S. Comics with an S, pals. And of course, if you are on YouTube right now, thank you for watching. You can leave us a like, drop us a comment, share this video with your friends, and of course, subscribe to our channel. All of those things are free to do, and they help us out a lot more than they cost you. Marco, it's outside my window.
No, it's right here too.
You too? Oh
Yeah.
man, it's wild. I feel like I'm missing out on something, but I know
Right?
I'm not.
Bro, Jay Garrick is president, the fastest president you've ever not seen.
Okay.
Not bad. That's not bad.
That was decent. I like it. So of course, you should join our Discord. We always have lots of fun conversations going on over there. This week, the conversation that I remember the most was we were talking about the state of Marvel and DC, and how, some of us are a little sour on the events that they're delivering these days. And we're going to be talking about DC today. We're going to be talking about DC in depth because they have allegedly they are going down a very, very interesting road with their publishing line. So you're going to want to stick around and hear us talk about that. And then, of course, we're going to be reviewing the X content of the week, X-Men number 14 and Marauders number 14. So lots of cool stuff to jump into this week on the podcast.
Just missing another X.
Yeah, I read the wrong X content.
That's great. Now,
always can count on you to do your due diligence, Phil.
in the spirit of what we have now learned that Joe Biden has won the election.
Jay Garrick.
Jay Garrick, Joe Biden, what's the difference? Someone should update Joe's Twitter, by the way. It still does not say president. I mean, if I just became the president of the United States, my
first
shit would
damn
be
thing you do.
updated instantaneously. That's the first second I would go on. Once CNN said I was the president, gotta update Twitter.
He hasn't come out to say he's president yet. He hasn't declared victory.
He probably doesn't know. He's taking a nap.
President Trump first night of votes, he came out and was like, basically won.
My man said, we were on track to win this election. We did win this election.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what he said.
I love it. And then he said, we want all voting to stop.
That's right.
Like, all right.
It did.
Dude, that's the playground rules. No, you're not supposed to tag me. That's not the rules. Like, you make up the rules as you go along, kind of, in the game, so you keep winning.
Well, my favorite was when he was like, we need to stop counting when he was behind. It's like, okay, fine.
Well, he wanted them to stop counting and just tally up all what was already in. Had they done that at that time, he would have won.
There was at one point where he said where he was behind in both the electoral and the popular vote, though, where he was still pushing for it.
I think that was a little bit later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He should count all the real ballots. That was later. That's what it became.
All
In
the
any
legal
event.
ballots.
That's right, legal ballots.
Did you guys see the Avengers Endgame election version?
I saw that this morning. Yeah.
No.
You didn't? All right. Well, I'm actually going to play it for you guys.
Oh,
I
let's
do
go.
think it's appropriate. And believe it or not, I actually found this video to be sort of like almost kind of emotional a little bit. Like it was pretty interesting. So I'm gonna put that up for you guys now. For those of you who are watching on YouTube.
Oh, God. Hold on 1 second.
Oh God.
Wait, pause it real quick.
Oh, okay.
My screens are messed up, so everybody's just got a pink screen right now. Hold on.
Oh.
All right, hold on. I'm
I
gonna...
already hate this.
Oh, God.
I'm about this.
All right, give me 1 second.
I saw
to
a
fix
Star
this.
Wars related one, not this.
Is
I
Joe
didn't see a Star
Joe
Wars
Biden old cap?
Yes.
Well,
Like,
Not
Yes.
old Cap. He
He's
is
Cap.
No, I mean,
like he is, yes.
Oh.
But here
Yeah.
he's Captain America.
Okay.
instead of Jay Garrick, is he?
That's
old cap?
that's not bad. That's not bad. I like that. Put in your vote for old Cap.
No, I don't think I will.
You better
All right, go ahead.
get the fucking
Cool.
orange skull again.
All right, here we
The
go.
orange skull. Look at that swagger.
So Trump is Thanos.
That's right.
Got those pursed lips.
I don't know if you guys can hear it.
No, not at all.
No, you can't.
Turn it up.
There should be an option to share the sound as well.
Oh, well, geez.
Got-
I don't see that option.
Everybody's gonna see how the soup gets made.
It's just look at this. Georgia's coming through. I
Hell
Fun.
yeah.
That's
Why
right.
isn't Stacey Abrams the Black Panther?
love
Oh,
it. 'Cause that's her
Oh,
problem.
that's why.
real-time reaction there.
Damn.
I didn't know Obama was from Georgia.
Oh man, he's not, but he's black. So you know.
He's definitely not from America. We all know that.
That's right.
Oh my
That's
God.
right.
I just can't hear it. But when they showed Trump right there, he said, "We want all voting to stop."
Oh,
Oh.
jeez.
Oh yeah, that weirdly makes sense. Beto
Oh,
is
boy.
fucking Chris Pratt.
Oh my god, I love it.
I don't know who that is actually.
That was Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Votes matter.
Yeah.
Mayor Peter Parker.
What's wild
Oh.
is
So funny.
that's you know what I like that. Well, not crazy about the Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, don't show
Gang.
Nancy
Sorry,
Pelosi.
no.
I love all of the Trump faces, frankly.
Who is
Hunter
that?
fucking Biden, dude.
Oh, I didn't clock that.
Greta Thunberg.
Oh.
First, Mr. Yang Gang himself.
Damn.
Oh.
Yo, R.I.P., yo.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
jeez.
no.
From the grave.
Wow. Why is Sean Connery
What?
there?
Sean Connery there. My man liked Trump, I think.
Oh man, he's saying no one's gonna take our democracy from us. Biden was.
Cory Booker looking
Oh
little.
my god.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
That is too
Good stuff,
good.
right?
Needed more of the
Absolute
Trump
wild.
kids.
Very fun. Very fun. As the party continues,
I just
outside
hear
my
people
window,
screaming in the background.
What's
Yeah.
crazy is while we were watching this, there were certain parts that you could hear the people in the background of Sean and Marco's
Yeah.
audio, and it worked in time with the video.
Oh, that's fun.
That's good
It's
stuff,
funny.
man.
The conservative person said to me, "I can't believe so many people like Joe Biden." I was like, "Nah, dog, you don't understand. Everyone hates Trump."
Nobody likes Joe Biden.
That is indeed true.
Yo, Sean, your camera's off.
My camera's off. I don't know why that happened.
Maybe because
I'm
he's
back.
not changed.
There we
He's
go.
back.
There we go.
Eric
No one
Bischoff,
will take
baby.
our democracy. Oh my god.
Congrats, Joe. All right, let's jump into the Pals polls. So first up from Cale, we've got Power Rangers #1.
So what I didn't know last week was that they're splitting the release week for these this new era of Power Rangers titles. Last week was Mighty Morphin, and you know what? It was actually pretty good. I bought it this week. It seems like they're going to explore Zordon's background on Eltar and how that relates to the Power Rangers and stuff, and it's actually not bad.
Who wrote that?
Ryan Perot.
Oh, that guy.
Ryan Parrott, however you say his name. But this week I'm talking about Power Rangers, which is it follows the Omega Rangers, which is Jason, Trini, and Zach after they separated from the original team. And they are I don't know what the hell they're doing, but they apparently have some kind of tie-in with Draken in this series, and they have to go directly against Zordon's wishes, and they have to team up with Draken. I don't know about that. I'm very cautious about this because Sean and I talked about it last week. The battle for the grid is actually kind of what took us away from the Power Rangers titles, and often I find that with this era of Power Rangers, they use Tommy like DC uses Batman. And now it's just going to be, oh, what if Tommy was evil? And now he's just going to kind of flip-flop as whoever needs whatever. But those Omega Ranger suits are cool as hell.
I gotta see them. I haven't seen them.
You want me to share my screen? I'll show them to you.
You gotta be made the host.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This show's all high def and shit now.
Yeah.
Now the real question is, how long does it take Cale to figure out how to share? Oh, never mind.
2
Not-
seconds, you
Grandpa!
dumb
The bit
bitch.
didn't even get through. Wow, look at you, Grandpa.
Oh wow, those actually
do look
are
cool.
sick.
I like the
Right?
cool cat thing in the background.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that, but
Wow, those are really cool, dude.
That is a dope cover.
Yeah.
Oh my god, and Trini has a giant
yeah, dog.
like hammer. That is
Yeah,
amazing.
dog.
I bet it makes more sense than Carol Danvers getting a giant hammer and
Empire.
Secret Empire, yeah.
You're probably right.
So anyway,
Very cool.
there you go.
I like it. So Pete and I both chose Marauders, assortment of X books. There's 3 books coming out next week, actually, from the X-Men line. So, we're just generally excited. Marauders, Excalibur, and Wolverine.
Yeah, well, obviously we'll talk more about that in the main topic when we get into the X books reviews right now. But yeah, I mean,
almost made Wolverine my pick, and then I saw that it was Jerry Duggan and Ben Percy, and I went, okay, no thanks. Not for me.
Let Percy do his thing. Yeah.
I think that's a solid team.
I don't need Jerry Duggan, frankly.
Yeah.
All right. I think it's probably difficult to keep up with this event from a writing perspective. They're probably just lending each other a helping hand.
It could
real
be,
quick,
yeah.
I got to disrupt this for a second. So I have a data miner thing for my job as a journalist, and it said the data miner says Fox News reportedly discussing Sharpies instead of declarations of Joe Biden winning the election.
Jesus.
What?
They were discussing Sharpies instead.
That makes sense.
Wow, rude.
They just need some time to really they need some space to work through all those feelings that they're having right now.
Mhm.
Sharpies, though.
So Marco,
Sup?
you picked up like I did, Blue and Green,
I did.
a couple weeks back, and you had the opportunity to finish that. How was it?
It was good. I think I don't know that it was anything stand out from like a narrative perspective. I think there were some interesting noir influences in there. There was a lot of really abstract sort of concepts in the book as well. I enjoyed it for the art and I think Ram V's storytelling has been something that I've been trying to get a little more accustomed to, because I know he's going to start to put out like some new Swamp Thing stories as part of the future state. So like, I've been just trying to figure out like what his deal is, how he sort of executes his stuff. It was good. It was good. Nothing super like crazy standout, but what I read was fun.
Was the art worth the price of admission?
I was a little mixed on the art. I think it was definitely, if you like a watercolor, almost like sketched design, I think it's definitely there for you. I definitely enjoy watercolors, but there's something about a sketch that it doesn't feel so complete that I sometimes feel a certain way about, and I don't always enjoy. The watercolor sort of helped augment that piece of it, so I wasn't like totally down on it. But yeah, if you're good with watercolor, if you're good with sort of sketched, almost incomplete art in some moments, but like fuller in others, I think it works out.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that you were really excited about this book. I was kind of excited too when we talked about it on the show a few months ago. So I'm interested in diving into it, but I expected you to be more high on it, honestly.
Yeah, I would definitely, if you get a chance to read it, would definitely love to hear your thoughts on it. But I mean, I think the preview images that we saw got me a little more excited, and maybe I went in with that. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear what you said.
I'm sorry, guys, if you can hear all this madness outside.
Yo, I was gonna say,
excited about our pals polls.
New York City is on fire.
Thanks all.
So the other thing I wanted to quickly mention was Phil is coming into some cash, and he needs
Finally sold all that semen, huh?
Very,
All of it.
very high demand. Yes.
Wow.
That's true.
Wow.
I could see that. Phil, of all of us on the show, I could see Phil being the one who women ask for that they want that from him to
That's right.
use it to have children.
That's right.
You're
Right.
right, and I've never understood that.
He's got this
Excuse me.
weird. It's like it's an animal magnetism.
He does. He really does.
I don't know what it is.
Phil, I mean, he bats him away sometimes.
It's wild.
I get ridicule on this podcast sometimes for it.
Rightly so.
Marco, you're just a thirsty bitch.
So Phil's coming into some money. He needs to buy an absolute edition,
That's right.
obviously, of a DC work. So not an omnibus. Don't recommend, Batgirl of Burnside omnibus. He needs
coming
an
out?
absolute.
That's right.
What's that, Cale?
Is that coming out?
I don't
Just kidding.
know. They do have Gail Simone's Batgirl from the New 52, and I want that.
Yeah. So I missed the show last week. It's been a crazy couple weeks with the news, so I've had to work a lot more, and as a result, I got a big paycheck coming in on Friday, and I want to use some of it toward buying an Absolute Edition. I only have 3, and we were talking about it, I think, 2 weeks ago when they announced there was a Swamp Thing Absolute Edition, and I said I would want to get it. But it made me realize I could buy... I don't have to buy that. There's other Absolute Editions. So if you guys have recommendations, either post them in the Discord or get at me on the Twitter. I'm thinking about Sandman. I'm thinking about Swamp Thing. I'm thinking about V for Vendetta. Watchmen would be good. Give me your suggestions.
Yeah. Write in. Let us know what you guys think Phil should pick up. If you have any recommendations, we'll definitely read them all, and we will talk about it next week on the show.
I will make my purchase after the show next week.
Ooh.
Or maybe during the show.
Do it live.
Yeah, I'll make the purchase during the show next
Nice.
Saturday, which will be posted next Monday.
I really wanted to make a joke here, but all the Absolute Editions are so good that it's kind of like there isn't a bad one.
Let me get
At least not
Daphne
that I
Byrne
saw.
Absolute Edition, okay?
There it is. The book that single-handedly saved the comic book industry.
Yeah, Pete, that was solid.
You know? What can I say?
You said
What
it.
more could be said about Daphne?
What more can be said about Daphne Byrne?
That should be a podcast.
No, it shouldn't. Have you ever read, just as an aside, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
I haven't. No.
They
It's
have that.
weird. It's weird.
According
It's
to
not-
Alan Moore, it's the only good comic book, so.
That's
it's
right.
not. It's not what you think it's gonna be.
What a ringing endorsement. This is the only good comic book. Alan Moore.
That sounds like the guy you knew in school that did nothing but talk shit, but he liked one thing. And part of you was like, well, it's like the only thing he likes. Maybe I should check it out.
I'm right,
right.
here, Phil.
Shh.
This isn't an Absolute Edition, but it is an omnibus. Red Hood and the Outlaws by Scott Lobdell.
Cale, stop listening for a second. Guys, we should chip in and get that for Cale. It's like the Christmas present.
God.
Love it.
That would be
I just
so
want it.
mean.
I
Just
just
to
want
buy him that
hate
expensive
this.
of a gift, that's just a prank.
Well, Cale, you can come back now. Yeah, so, Cale, not talking about Red Hood and the Outlaws or anything.
Good. Why would you?
Yeah.
Scott Lobdell's the worst. We should burn his house down.
Oh, yeah.
Shit.
All right, let's not call for murder.
Cale, what's your
I
address
didn't say he was gonna be in it.
Well, you know.
I mean, it could be. But that's not on me.
Jesus.
Oh boy.
Just
All right.
incriminate us. That's great. So, like, fast forward to, like, his house burns down for an unrelated reason. The 4 of us get arrested, and Cale is overseas.
Can't get me.
They'll extradite your ass.
No proof.
All right, let's get into a little bit of news here. So, the 2 news pieces that we're going to start with are going to be a part of the third news item that we're going to end with, which is the biggest thing that happened this week. And so we're going to kick it off with a little conversation about, according to Milton Griepp from ICV2, how the coronavirus impacted the comics industry. Now, for those of you who don't know, Milton Griepp is a stalwart of the comics community. He's been around since the dawn of time, and he's done it all in the business from a business standpoint. Doesn't create the books, but he's sold them, he's analyzed them, yada yada yada. And frequently, he, through his website, puts out a financial look at the business and what's been going on. So Forbes took that and they made an article out of it, and it's pretty interesting. So he put out his state of the industry, and he aggregated all these different sources to discuss the finances of the business. And so what did we learn? Well, we learned that had it not been for the coronavirus, we were on track to break the record set in 2019 of 1.2 billion sales,
Wow.
which is tremendous. That's great news for the business. That we were trending to eclipse even that number. The comics industry is a $1 billion industry, and I don't think we talk about it like that enough. So I think that's worth noting. But that's the good. That's the good. There's some more good, but obviously the coronavirus impacted things in a negative way, and for 7 weeks, of course, Diamond had shut things down. We remember that. Those were the dark days. DC, of course, they picked things back up quicker through Lunar and UCS. They weren't down to lose out on all that money. So according to the Forbes article, the sales of comics in the retail channel were down 29% overall, with individual comics floppies down 37%, graphic novels down 18%, and manga down 8%. And we lost 93 retailers as a result of that. That's a big number.
Yeah.
That's a really big number and a scary number. And that's out of around 1,500 total retailers across the country.
Damn.
1,500 total, you said?
Yeah, around that number.
And that's what we have left, or that's what we had before we lost the 93?
That's what we had before. That's where we started.
And
then we lost 93.
That's a large percentage.
Yeah. Now, in the bookstore channel, so, Barnes & Noble or Scholastic or whatever, obviously Scholastic is probably not a factor in this conversation, but in general, it was the opposite. Sales actually went up. And that is likely because of kids.
Yeah.
Because the top selling books have been things like Dogman, which has been doing tremendously well. So in the what they call juvenile fiction genre of comics, we saw 37% of all graphic novel sales were through bookstores. 31% of all manga sales through bookstores. The superhero genre was only 7% of those sales.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And a 10% drop off from where it was last year.
Percent.
Sorry?
10%?
10%.
A 10% drop.
10%.
Damn.
In the book channel, the bookstore channel.
Bookstore, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Griepp says that he analyzes this as 5 years worth of change in 1 year. What's happened in 2020?
Yeah.
I feel like I lived 5 years of life in 2020.
Yeah.
Dude, we were in the hyperbolic time chamber forever.
Really. It talks about DC and the big changes that DC made. They made monumental shifts this year. They laid off a ton of creators. Obviously, we've seen Dan Didio forced out. Changes at the top. Jim Lee's role is different now. And of course, the biggest thing they did was they ditched Diamond for Lunar and UCS. Of course, now they only have Lunar. And Marvel really didn't do much. Marvel really didn't make any changes. Marvel kind of kept things afloat and didn't feel the need to do too many big things. So the biggest takeaway for me from this article is that the comics industry did not falter in the ways that we thought it would. It didn't fall apart in the ways that we thought it would. Were things bad? Yes. Obviously, we talked about the loss of almost 100 stores out of 1,500. That's not good. But when you think about what we actually went through this year, when you think about the scope of everything and the doom and gloom that was being reported about where the industry was headed, that's not that bad. You're talking about an expansion of comics in the book market, which is a positive thing. You're talking about an industry that didn't die, that's still healthy in a lot of ways, and that's finding new ways to service audiences across the globe. I think that's positive.
Definitely. I think the line in this article that I thought was most interesting, it was right in the paragraph where you said how he noted it was like 5 years worth of change in a year. And he said he noted the pandemic accelerated dynamics already at work in the industry and forced publishers, distributors, and retailers to face weaknesses in their models that the crisis brought to the fore. And I think that's the thing that I'm most interested in, right? Is that, like, to your point, it wasn't nearly as catastrophic as I expected. I definitely thought we would see more stores close than 100, and that's not an insignificant number. That's a large percentage of all of the shops, and we've talked a lot about how when those shops close, they're probably not going to reopen, right? You're probably not going to see a new comic book store crop up to replace it, because they close a lot more than they open. So I think that is such an interesting wrinkle to things, is like, not necessarily is this representative of a change that's still going to continue on this or at this level, right? Because as places are reopening and we got like curbside pickup and these alternatives and you're able to go to shops again, the regular rhythm for a lot of readers had returned. But I wonder how many people in that off period did go and buy at a bookstore or order trades off Amazon or switch to Comixology, like Marco, I know got in that game hugely over this period. So that, I think, is probably the more interesting takeaway to me, is that it's great to hear that comics are in a place where they're $1 billion industry. I love to see like all these young readers picking up Dogman and all these new books and like getting an interest in comics. I wonder, I hate to get ahead of myself. I'm very interested to see what the numbers look like next year, right? Where does this trend continue? Do we have a second wave where we're stuck in like a serious lockdown mode again, especially now that Joe Biden, is going to be the president? Like, what does that mean? Do we see more comic book store closures? Do we see more people going to these quote-unquote alternative channels to get their comics? Because I think you look at the manga percentages, and that's super telling, right? That the channels that people buy manga through seem to, at least anecdotally, have been less disrupted. And that's probably because the vast majority of their sales don't come from comic book stores, don't come from a niche local shop that doesn't have an online distribution model, right? Where if you're reading manga and maybe you went to a store to pick it up, all of a sudden you have to order it online or whatever, how much does that really change what you're doing, right? Yeah. Not that much.
It would also be interesting to find out how manga was affected by the virus in general.
Like in a distribution capacity?
In the same way we're talking about it here, is there manga pals in Japan that, are talking about, manga and the disruption of shonen or something, was it disrupted? I don't know that it was, actually. I don't recall hearing anything.
I like us having Japanese doppelgangers.
I love that idea. I think it's interesting when you bring that up, because like I know very little about manga, but one of the things that I think is true, and Marco can correct me, is that I feel like many manga are produced by one person and are like, there's not a colorist, there's not, there like are less hands that a piece has to get translated from. So I wonder how that impacted like production, like how many books, like did less manga stop than single comic issues?
It's less so a person, like yes, like the driving force is a single person, but they have teams typically that like inking teams, penciling teams,
Okay.
that it's much more,
Backgrounds.
yeah, it's much more structured than it would be anything else.
Interesting.
But yeah, I think to your point, like the understanding how they survived or how they did better or were less impacted is probably a lesson to be learned and to be replicated, right? Because it shows that it can be future proofed to some extent should something like this happen again, or just generally it means that because there's a larger mode of distribution and a mode of consumption, more people can have access to it. It might grow it a little bit more
Well,
so than other sources.
let's not forget the reason why we stopped was because Diamond wanted to make sure we were being safe.
Mm-hmm.
No,
wasn't
sure.
it wasn't anything on the creative end. It wasn't even anything, at least for the big two, it wasn't even anything about like we can't produce books. It was Diamond's not shipping them
True.
and stores aren't there to receive them. So I don't know if that, I don't think that that's really a difference between manga and comics in the sense of like production. It's really just there was nowhere to put them and Diamond wasn't going to put them out.
Right, right. And I think that is strictly related to the distribution, but then that means that, or you could extrapolate that uh manga is more accessible. It has more ways for you to access that content outside of it having to be printed and shipped to a specialty store. And like the mode of consumption there is much more vast compared to the comics industry, whereas potentially, and obviously we don't necessarily know, but that distribution model wasn't affected or less so based off of the numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the way I interpret this data is it says comic retail channel, right? That makes me feel like this is talking about comic book stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's the case, and it's saying that manga was down only 8%, I think that's literally just in stores, like in comic book stores.
Well, it mentions within the book market as well, so I don't know how they're parsing out that data.
So in the book market, it says that all 37% of all graphic novels sold um, through bookstores was the juvenile fiction genre, followed by manga at 31%, and that's in bookstores.
Okay.
Right.
Because you'd imagine most people who buy manga in the West are probably getting it from a bookstore or like an Amazon, some kind of distributor like that, rather than because I don't feel like you usually see a ton of manga in comic book stores.
Not a lot.
Depends on where you are. Obviously, some shops are going to cultivate that kind of market, but like anecdotally, no shop that I've frequented has ever had like a ton of manga. You know, maybe a few of like you see like your Naruto's or your One Piece or whatever, but like you know, not necessarily like the deeper cuts or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, my local shop is Midtown Comics, and they have a ton, but that's
Mhm.
obviously an outlier.
They have like a whole section, right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think the other interesting thing here is specific to the YA section, being that like it's been the understanding, and I feel like we've reported on one of the like a similar article or like later last year, but I think it's also like a sobering tell of where comics are being, or by what demographic comics are being consumed by, and like can we now say that the retail or direct market is the largest market anymore, or like the fastest growing? Like it feels like we have to also better define now what comics and the comics industry is, because of how large a share and how apparently unaffected the YA section has been, and those aren't always put out via the direct market. They're more so in bookstores. So like, do we now have to define those bookstores as being the real places where people buy comics, quote unquote, as defined in however we will?
I think that's an interesting challenge for sure.
Well, especially because like it's interesting to look at that data and wonder what it means long term. Because
Yeah.
one of the things that's called out at the end of this Forbes piece is it says the biggest challenge ahead is finding a place in the retail equation for the millions of readers of Dogman who will eventually age out and start looking for other stuff to read. If comics can hold on to those new readers, 2020 will look like just a bump in the road in the rearview mirror. And that's interesting, right? Is like, because I remember being a kid and reading comics that were not traditional comics. Like I remember I read like the Pokemon Adventures manga, the Western localization, and like Captain Underpants, which was Dave Pilkey's big series before Dogman, and stuff like that are like technically comics and are like the kinds of books that I think are making up a good percentage of this 37% of youth sales that we're talking about. But like, are those now activated readers, or are those kids who are fans of Dogman, right? And like when they age out of that, do they go looking for more comics? Are they thinking of comics as unique, right? As like, I'm reading comics and I want to read more comics, or do they just see this as reading a book? Because I know at that age, I wasn't really making that distinction. And when I aged out of reading those books, it wasn't until I circled back and got into like Ultimate Spider-Man, which was a more traditional comic, that I got into quote unquote got back into comics, right? So like, I don't know, like, what does this actually mean long term for the industry is like a super interesting question.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
No, go for it.
I think a smart shop would take what you just said, Pete, and would make a kids section,
Yeah.
like a big good one,
Or like a transitional section.
or something. Yeah, because like, your question was, do they recognize they're reading a comic, or do they recognize they're reading a book? Well, if they get it at a bookstore, they probably think they're reading a book. But if they get it at a comic book store, they'll know that there is stuff like it.
I think that's a really big piece of this, and it's something that we can't overlook. So there's a graph here that shows that, and I believe they said it's for the first time, that the book channels have surpassed comic stores in sales of comics for the first time. 570 million in the book channel to 525 million.
Didn't we look at this? This is the 2019 graph in this article. I feel like we looked at this last year, and that was.
Oh, did we?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
we did.
that last year was the first time that the market had ever officially overtaken it, and now it's like we're parsing through this data
That's fine.
again.
Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is the fact that those sales, because Dogman's been popular for a while. It's not new.
No.
And those sales eventually aren't necessarily going to be there. I mean, there will always be kids, I guess. But those people who are, maybe 10, 11, whatever, reading those books, if they don't, like, what I'm trying to say is we don't know what that means for comics
Right.
as a whole. And we don't know if you can activate those people to read even if it's not Marvel or DC. It could be Image, it could be Boom, it could be whatever. I don't believe that they know that they're reading comics. When I was a kid and I was reading those like Pokemon things or, Captain Underpants, whatever, I didn't know I was reading comics. And when people ask me what's the first comic you ever read, I've never in my life said that,
Even though that's probably what it is, right? Like,
right. And that's something that the industry has to figure out if it can tackle. because there is a disconnect between the knowing of what you're consuming. When you read a book, you know you're reading a book. It doesn't matter where you got it. The fact that where you buy a comic determines whether or not you know you're reading a comic is a problem. The fact that kids or even parents who are buying Dogman for their kids don't know that they're buying their kids comic books is a problem.
Or yeah, because it's so interesting because like it's such a weird like modular, it's such a weird middle ground, right? Like you think, oh, my kid's reading, like great, you know, like I read a ton of like Calvin and Hobbes as a kid, and I would go get those the big collected editions at a Barnes and Noble, and you go to the comic section and get it, but it's not the same as going to a comic book store and getting inundated in like the culture of comics, you know?
Those are in a funny book section. It's the humor section, and they even were back then.
Yeah, those were the comic strips are always sold in different places from comic books and manga.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What's your make of this, Phil?
Well, I think we really have to give it up to you and Marco here, Sean. With all these percentages down, you guys are keeping the industry up, just the two of you. You're
No,
both
Marco's on digital now, baby.
Oh shit!
Hey, those sales count. Those sales count.
Yeah, Sean, Atlas here, man, just keeping the comic book industry up on your shoulders.
Someone on this damn podcast has to buy a comic.
Hey, listen, I'm gonna drop 100
a real
on
one?
Absolute next week.
A real one, yes.
Like when I can touch.
Ew.
Yeah.
You're gonna be eating dinner off that comic. Like, what's the?
I think to what Pete was saying as to like only, I guess us only associating it to Dogman as like an IP versus like understanding the comic. I think that's definitely a great point. I also know that Raina Telgemeier's books have also been extremely popular and are separate of the Dogman works. I know Matt Lukes is another creator that I follow who does a lot of YA novels. Like I think they're and maybe this is just because we aren't as inundated in that culture, but I think that there is somewhat of an understanding that those are comics. The last time I had gone to Barnes and Noble's, like earlier this year, they had a section that had broken out into young adult comics and
youth comics.
Yeah, they're distinguishing it now, I think, more. And I think to your point, it's totally valid that maybe the child isn't perceiving it to be distinct in any way, but I think there is a concerted effort to try to distinguish it for the audience or even for the parents who are trying to pick it up for those kids. Because if you're able to distinguish that, ideally you can funnel them into one way. I think the ultimate goal here is to funnel those kids into comics in some way or form. And I think that at the very least, I think that there is some sort of messaging around that has been somewhat successful, at least from like the retail end in the Barnes and Nobles that I've seen or the bookstores that I've seen.
I don't disagree with that. I think that's accurate. But I think that if you're a parent, right, and you buy your kid Dogman, if you went into a store and you saw X-Men, would you say, "Oh, my kid likes Dogman. I wonder if they'll like X-Men"?
Well, it's a sequel.
but I guess like if they're being categorized as a YA comic and a comic, then that shouldn't have to be need to be distinguished necessarily, because you could say, okay, this one's just for kids, whereas this one is, hey, he's growing up, maybe I can get him this comic.
And even still, there are X-Men like kids books, kids comics that would probably go in that same section.
In my mind, the level of thought you just put into it is deeper than what the average parent is when they're at the store buying books for their kids.
Parents are fucking stupid.
And it's a lot different when you're buying Harry Potter to say, okay, yeah, my kid is reading Harry Potter and they love it. The next step up is whatever the hell, Hunger Games,
Sure,
or, whatever. Then it is to say, oh, my kid's reading Dogman. The next step up is Spider-Man or Batman.
right.
I really believe in my mind that there is a difference between those things in the minds of a person who doesn't know anything about comics. Like, we have to remember, and this is something that I think we forget. We're really close to it.
Yeah.
But pull yourself out of that. I bet most people don't realize that they still make X-Men comics. I bet anything on that. That most people don't realize that X-Men and Spider-Man and Batman still get published every single week.
I don't know if that's true, but boy, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think, John, you made me really think in real time.
Brilliant
Wow.
commentary from Phil.
It's tough
Riveting
though, right?
conversation.
Because I think to Sean's point, like, you start thinking about, well, everyone I know knows that because most of the people I know either read comics or know me, right? So, and they know I do a comic book podcast, so that already taints all of your observable data. And then it's like, all right, well, like, I think about, like, my dad, right? Well, he knows that because of me too. So it's like, it gets worse and worse and worse. Where
The question is getting out of your own bubble, right? And that's what's always tricky in any walk of life, period, is trying to get out of your own bubble. I think we've come a long way from that perception because I think back to a memory from when I was a kid of people just getting basic comic book facts wrong leading into Spider-Man 3 because people just aren't really knowledgeable about the in and outs of comic books. But I think comic books have become such a large part of greater media at this point. I think even without reading stuff, I think most people recognize that there are Spider-Man comics and whatnot that do come out every week. They just have no interest in reading it.
2
But I
points.
think-
Sorry, I just want to get this out. One, comic books have not become so ubiquitous. The characters have.
Yes,
And I think that's
what
a
I mean.
massive distinction. Two, how many parents do you know? People who are working all day and then come home and have to take care of their kids. I don't think they know or care whether or not Spider-Man is being published. Yeah, you could say like someone in their 20s, early 30s, who's a free spirit, who watches the movies, who has friends who read comics and all of that. But once you get past that point and you're talking about adults who actually have 11, 12-year-old children, I don't think they know or care anything about that. They might watch a Marvel movie and they love it, but I don't think their knowledge of comic books extends past that.
You have me wondering now. I'm gonna ask some boomers I work with that are like in their 50s and 60s. Like, I don't know what the question framing will be, but I'll be like, "Hey, you remember?"
Just be like, hey, have you read the latest Spider-Man comic?
No. That frames the question incorrectly because then
They will legitimately say, I guarantee you. Oh, I didn't even know they published those anymore.
No, because it puts the idea in their head. That's bad polling data. I don't know.
What is this, the U.S. election? Well, who gives a shit?
we do.
No.
If you wanted to buy a comic book, would you know where to get it?
Okay. Yeah, I'll ask some older people I know, and I'll come back to the show next week. Just because this isn't like a right or wrong thing, I'm just curious.
Anecdotally, yeah.
Yeah.
Because to your point, Sean, like I think about like my cousin and her husband who are in their 40s and they have 2 kids who are teenagers, right? Like the way that I think about the way that older people relate to younger people, quote unquote, media is like, is your kid interested in this? Right. And to the point that you made, if you have a kid who is reading Dogman specifically, right? We'll keep that example. I don't know that you make that you draw that comparison. Whereas like if maybe they're reading like we talked a couple months ago about how they had that new YA Miles Morales book that was coming out, right? So like I can see the line between, okay, I've got a kid We saw Spider-Verse. They loved Miles Morales. I'll buy them this YA book. Okay, I want to get them something else. Okay, let's get them the Miles Morales collected edition that's for teenagers now that they're 12 or 13, right? Like, you can see how that line gets drawn from the more like, the more like quote unquote bookstore comics. I think that's like a way tougher question. And it's not like the one-to-one that you see in pretty much any other medium, because if you think of Dogman as a book, the next step might be a Harry Potter or a Hunger Games or a Lord of the Rings or whatever. Whereas, like, if your kid plays video games, right? Like, you bought them a box to play video games and you buy the next video game, right? Or if they liked a Marvel movie, you watch the other fucking 30 Marvel movies on Disney Plus or whatever, right? It's so much easier to draw the line between my child is interested in this to what's the next step in any of those other examples.
And I think to just to move it away from the superhero example, because I think like the question was posed, would someone know that the X-Men is still being published? But I think you could safely say that it was like, do comic books exist for you to consume? And I think that somebody is going to say yes, regardless of whether or not it's a X-Men book or like a random indie book or an Image book. And if Dogman doesn't fit into a superhero genre necessarily, or well, it would, but let's say something by Raina or by Matt Lukes, like if those don't fit into it and those are big books that they're consuming, they're just other pieces of content that you could, I think, following Pete's logic, which I agree. I think like you become invested as a parent in providing your child with what they would want to consume. You go and look into the subsequent section that either within the YA comic section or the further comic section, because they've come to realize that maybe it's not superheroes necessarily, but comics exist, and this is something that your child has consumed, and therefore like you can make the jump outside of just the big two or to anything else.
Marco,
That is
you're adding so much of yourself to that, dude.
no, but
dude. If you really think that the average American parent knows that there's comics outside of the big two, like that there's comics at all, then that there's comics that aren't Captain America or Batman, then that they're going to be sitting there in the YA comic section and going, let me see what non-big two.
Yeah,
books
what's
I can
Timmy
buy
gonna
for my
read?
child."
No.
That's not.
No.
That's
But I'm not
what's
saying that.
happening.
I'm not saying that they're looking out for specifically comic books that aren't the big two. I'm saying that they understand that because the comics exist and because people conflate superheroes with comics, you can safely say that obviously there's going to be some sort of comic and we can conflate that with superheroes or whatever. It's going to exist out there because there hasn't been any doubt that those kind of comics are being published regardless of the character.
There hasn't been?
Superhero comics are being published.
That's what I'm saying. I disagree with that on a baseline. I don't think the average American knows that comics still get published. I don't believe that.
But if you're a parent and you're trying to facilitate your child's interests, I think you do, because otherwise I think it's a shitty parent.
I think most parents are not thinking like that.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, yeah, because I think to that point, I think that there are parents that think like that, but I think that, like Sean said, if you're talking about like, average working class American, whatever, like you're gonna give your kid what they're interested in, and if they're interested in Dogman or whatever, that doesn't necessarily draw the line to, well, let's get Timmy into a comic book store, Like, cause do you know where the nearest comic book store is? Do you know that there's content out there for them? Like,
I don't know that it was like a comic book store necessarily. I was just thinking like if you're picking up this book in a Barnes and Nobles, you'll get the next comic in a Barnes and Nobles.
Potentially,
even if you do, that what the most likely, because we've all been kids, right? So use your own experience.
Speak for yourself.
When I was a kid, I got what I wanted. My parents didn't like go and
curate
go like,
things
oh
for
yeah,
you.
Right. No, they got me what I said I wanted. So I think like
must be nice.
like even on that premise, I don't believe that the average American parent is like, let me go on my own. Let me take time out of my day to go to Barnes and Noble and peruse the specifically comic section and figure out how to indoctrinate my child. They don't care if their kid continues to read comics unless that's what their kid tells them they want to do, and then picks the book out.
Yeah,
and the kid has to know that it's a comic, and I don't think
and then they want it and all that,
and then,
right?
Yeah, I think you're putting too much faith in, and it's not even a matter of faith. It's just like that's not how parents work.
But like your parents never got you like a video game?
No.
Nope.
Really?
They got me what I said I wanted only.
Yeah, that's the thing is I like my using that example, right, Marco? When I wanted a video game, it was because I liked video games and I got Electronic Gaming Monthly because I was a huge fucking nerd. And I had a bunch of video game magazines that came to the house, and I'd be, this one, I want this one, and I'd pay attention to it for 6 to 12, whatever months, and it'd be on my calendar, and I'd be counting the days down, and then we'd go to Toys R Us, and I'd get the game. And the only time I would get games that I didn't ask for, or like that was not me directly asking to go and get the thing, would be at like holidays or my birthday, and it would still be from a list that I curated, you know?
Yeah.
I could tell you the specific games that I got that I didn't ask for. That's how rare of an occurrence that is.
Damn, really?
Yeah.
Like that shit
I didn't
happens.
get toys
Don't
I
get
didn't
me
ask
wrong,
for.
but
Dog, parents don't care.
No,
They don't care.
What?
They don't care.
The only time I ever got things I didn't like specifically ask for, I mean, I, like for specifically like entertainment. It was like if I was sick and like my parents were trying to do like a nice thing for me while I was sick. Like they went and got me something that I even asked
Must
for.
be nice.
Cause see, even in that scenario though, right? And it's like, and this is coming from the lens of like, I had parents that were like they paid attention to what I was interested in and tried to engage me on it, right?
Ooh,
like,
fucking brag.
I'm sorry your parents didn't love you, Cale. We all love you enough to make
Cale's
up
just in
for
the
it. Get
corner,
over
like-
it. But like to the example that Phil just gave, right? Like my dad would be like, "Oh, well, I know that he likes this, 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 and this, so I'll go get him this," right? And like,
Yeah, they were close.
yeah, like even that, it would be like, "Oh, you're really into like Harry Potter right now? Like, here, I got you like this fucking side thing or whatever. Great, okay." It's like
I got you a stick from the yard. You can pretend it's a wand.
more
If you
stories,
misbehave.
or something. I don't know.
more
If you
more of
misbehave,
Cale's
I will
stories
use
from
it
the
on
bread
you.
basket, huh?
Got me a Switch.
Oh, you guys don't want to hear my Harry Potter stories.
No, that's not.
Actually, maybe I do.
It's for another episode.
That's
The tool of the
all
devil.
this to say though, to sort of bring it back to stores and sort of what I was saying about comic book stores bringing all this in, what would be interesting in the future is to see, you know, one, if comic book stores can make deals with Scholastic or, you know, the people who are putting out these books for young readers, because that's got to be tough, especially when most of your stores are dying. But then also, if comic book stores can redirect attention to themselves, and I think that will be another struggle that will be tough, on top of the fact that even the big two don't advertise their product to normal people. You know, they're making billions of dollars off these properties, but they're not redirecting the market back to the comic book.
Not enough anyway, right? And it's like we've talked about this before, like ad nauseum, about how like there are limited examples of like I remember going to see Homecoming or Far From Home, whichever it was, and they like had a Spider-Man comic to give
Same
you,
movie.
right? Yeah, you'd know all about that, right, Kel? Why don't you tell me the plots of both of them? No, I don't want to hear you talk.
He
Shut
went
up.
home and then he left.
Honestly, better than I expected.
So like there are minimal efforts to do that sort of thing. And it's like, it's not the same as, and we draw this comparison a lot, but like, think about like how like if you're watching football, there's a commercial for the next Assassin's Creed or whatever, right? Or
For the next
Call of
football.
Duty. What?
The next football, yeah.
For the next
For the next
football,
football.
yes. Of
That was a
course.
joke, but you're absolutely right.
They're driving you back into the market.
And well, like I think about like my hometown, you know, bumfuck middle of nowhere, Texas. Like they lost their biggest chain, you know, in 2012, 13 or whatever.
Walmart?
Hastings, and legitimately, this was a huge blow across like the Midwest, and like comic book stores have struggled to stay open. If there was a local comic book store commercial, like that would get a ton of people, but there's not. And so people don't know about it. Therefore, parents don't know about it. And it's all probably religion and all that shit anyway. So,
You know what is interesting to me though, when we do talk about this, is like, to take it back to like Sean's question of like, does the average parent know this is an option? Blah 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 blah. I don't know about you guys, but anecdotally for me, whenever I go to Free Comic Book Day, it's like I feel like 75% of the people there are parents with kids.
Yeah.
Like every time. And that's super weird to me. That like in general, I feel like I agree with your point, Sean. It's like, how do these outlier people get that inundation? Maybe the parents are just fucking dorks, so they know, right? But
because the experience that you are referring to is a microcosm. That's an extremely limited thing. So you live, you know, now you live in a city, but you know, you didn't necessarily, you even lived in Jersey. Like you live in places where a comic book store might have been fairly accessible to get to.
yeah, where I grew up in Jersey, there were 3 comic book stores within driving distance.
Right. Like think of like leave Jersey, go to Wisconsin.
Sure.
Right?
yep.
Like go to Milwaukee. Like it's not America's huge and our knowledge bases are different. We live on the East Coast. Like there's just so many factors at play when it comes to that I really don't feel like the anecdotal evidence is fine and it does add context, but I don't think that that's a representation of what you would find in even like 90% of examples. I think it's that extreme. Yeah. I think it might be even more extreme than that.
I know what you mean, but Milwaukee probably has a lot of comic book shops.
I couldn't think of.
I know. I'm saying I know. I got your point. I'm just saying that I feel like Milwaukee probably
the
got
bumfuck part of Milwaukee.
Well,
okay,
yeah.
I don't know.
Like, I mean, to your point, Sean, right? Like now I live in Philly, and there are plenty of comic book stores here. But like, what about Western PA? Aside from like Pittsburgh, like between here and Pittsburgh, how many comic book stores are there that you could go to? Right? Like,
point.
Yeah, I think that is worthwhile.
Let's shift this conversation. We've been in this for a while. We've got a couple other things to get to. Keep in mind from that talk, though, the biggest, most important thing you can take from this conversation is that DC clearly, based on what we just discussed, is reading the tea leaves. DC is aware of where the money appears to be in comics. Keep that in mind. Now, DC Future State is the next big thing coming from them. Alongside that is an event that we've essentially forgotten about, which is Generations. Generations was supposed to be 5G. That, you know, that's basically gone at this point. And now we know that even though there's literally a book called Generations Future State, we now know that those two events have nothing to do with each other. They are not related at all.
Love it. It's like a naming convention pulled right from a fucking Capcom game or something.
So we're getting like 2 events at the same time?
That have nothing to do with each other, yet despite the fact that their names cross over.
And despite
What?
the fact that they have similar like ideas attached to them, Generations is exploring like time in DC and all that stuff, and Future State takes place in the future.
Exploring
And
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And there's another event called Endless Winter, which is also coming. So wrap your brain around that. Now,
Can't.
so Generations is going to continue in January and February. Of course, those are the same months we'll be getting Future State, but again, they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. The Batman editor for DC is saying that Generations is its own thing right now. Dan Jurgens and Kevin Nolan did great on the story in Detective Comics 127. Those are exciting, or 1027, I'm sorry. Those are exciting events, and people will be pleased on how that plays out.
We'll be
Now-
the judge of that.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks a lot. This is not something we need to chew on for long. I'm pointing this out to show that DC is clearly not aware of the sort of timeline of what they want to do and how things are going to be interrelated. This is how wonky things are over there. That this is all changing in real time in front of our faces. Detective Comics 1027, that was in September. So from September to now, these things are not related anymore. You literally published something 2 months ago that said, follow up with this story in Generations Future State.
1 month ago.
I'm sorry, 1 month ago.
This is some WWE booking.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Now, all of that is the build up to this announcement.
My head hurts.
Yeah,
Mine
you couldn't.
too.
You couldn't wrap
It's about
your
to
head
get
around it.
worse.
Bleeding Cool is reporting, and I know
Oh,
people
here we
hear that
fucking
and they,
go.
whatever. Bleeding Cool's right a lot of the time. I feel like when it comes to
Yeah.
this industry stuff.
They break
They're
most
reporting-
of the stories.
Yeah, exactly. They're saying that DC is, after Death Metal and Future State, abandoning continuity,
Oh,
and that they will be going toward an Omniverse model, which was referenced in Death Metal Rise of the New Gods. And essentially what that means is that things happened, but they don't matter for what you're reading unless they matter. That's basically what it means.
Jesus Christ.
All right.
So unless they specifically tell you, hey, Flash 1051 is really important here, you can assume that it's irrelevant. Now, obviously, that could get weird because then you could say, like, okay, well, I'm reading, this new Batman story. Does his origin matter here? How much of his origin matters here? Have there ever been Robins? Who has been Robin? All
Who's
of those,
Batman?
like that's how dumb this is.
I'm
But
Batman, chum.
really,
Old chum.
wow. So all of this it feels like an opposite motion of where Dan Didio was trying to get DC to go.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
Yeah, it does.
Remember
Dan
You can-
wanted,
You can see that.
yeah, he wanted like hyper continuity, and now we got the Omniverse.
Well, it's like his stuff, at least as convoluted as it was, it had a logic, and it, like, to some degree, was linear. Like, he was trying to make a universe of things make sense.
Yeah, that was Grant stuff, man.
Now, I wanna say real quick before you guys jump up that there are pros and there are cons. I'm gonna lay them out. The pros, obviously, this creates, from a far back perspective, we'll get closer, but just from a far back perspective, this creates better opportunities for people who are uninitiated to jump in and just pick a book up, right? If you just like Batman and you want to buy Batman #1, from now on, if Bleeding Cool is correct, Batman #1 will not require you to have read the actual Batman #1 from 1930 whatever. So that's a pro. Another pro, comic creators who work for DC Comics and have their one big Superman story in their mind can now tell that story without having to worry about whether or not Lois Lane is in space or captured or dead, whether or not Superman has a child. All of those things will be able to be basically restarted for your big story. Another pro is that there will be less continuity errors, because you can just say those things are irrelevant and you can throw them out the window. And the last pro in my mind is that typically Elseworlds type of stories do well for DC. They're often more evergreen because they're not so strictly tied to anything in particular. And you can generally do what you want to do. Look at a lot of the like top DC stories that get talked about a lot. Oftentimes those are the ones that are the least connected to anything in particular. Kingdom Come, which we did a book club on. You can go. Is that out yet?
Not
Get
yet.
you a glass of water.
End of the month.
Right up.
You guys will be able to hear that. Dark Knight Returns, all that stuff. You get my drift. Those are the pros. The cons, no continuity. No continuity is garbage, because there are so many fans who appreciate and love the vast history of DC and don't want to lose that. I think there are a lot of people who buy comics for the continuity, and losing that would hurt those people. Another con is that this feels like double dipping. You already have Black Label, you already have a YA line and things that are continuity light at the very least, that are doing well and that were your answer to those people who said, I want to be able to just jump into a story.
Sure.
So what happens with that? And also, it will inevitably create a feeling of things don't matter. And once that happens, are people actually as invested in these characters? When none of the stories connect to each other, do people still care in the way that they do? And actually, I have one more. That probably means you can't do events, at least not in the way you do them now. And without that, you lose out guaranteed on a certain revenue stream. There are people who buy events specifically and nothing else. So those are the pros and cons as I see them. What do you guys think?
That reminds me of what they were trying to do with DCU 5 years ago. This is when they were trying to do loose continuity stories that are more accessible for readers, to varying success. It feels like, damn Didio or not, DC has been really trying to experiment with getting away from continuity because it's just a tether. We've talked about it a million times on this show. Someone like Marco specifically, where it's like crisis this, crisis that, or Pete for that matter. It's a web that's complicated and difficult to navigate for people who aren't inundated with DC continuity, right? I think creatively it gives more opportunities to specific creators because that way they can tell their stories with no chains or anything. But as we discovered when we read like Sandman or Swamp Thing, continuity done well kind of provides like a historical feel to certain books. Like it feels like, this is like late 80s DC. It feels like it. So that kind of aspect will be lost. But I'd kind of argue, I don't know why, the last decade or so of comics don't feel distinct in continuity as much as times past. You go back to Civil War even, and it's like, this feels like mid 2000s Marvel. Maybe it's because we have different creators taking on events nowadays, and it's not so much a stable of people that operate specific events now like they did 15 years ago. It's more loose. It's a looser congregation now than it was then. Unlike the X books, where we do feel like we have a stable of writers and creators working on stuff, and that's why Hoxbox and Ten of Swords and everything feels like a specific era. Other than that specifically, everything feels looser in terms of this era of comics. So maybe having looser continuity will benefit DC specifically. I don't know.
Well, and how many events, have they done? Maybe it's just time to try something else.
I think that to Phil's point, I do think that there is, and Sean laid out a lot of opportunity. I think though, from like a logistical standpoint, I don't know why DC would make the choice to opt out of hitting those people who, I think you make a good point, Sean. Like there are people who love it for the continuity and who read the events. I don't know that the events will go away necessarily. It might be like, oh, this Batman from this universe and this whatever, like how do those play into each other or something? I think that you can still finagle that in some way. That might be interesting. And I think as to the continuity piece, agreed that there is like a history that you get from being able to look back at the actions of a character or things that have affected that character. But I wonder what if there's like a new combination of things that in the past have affected like Batman, for example, like let's say there's a storyline where like was Joe Chill never like killed the parents or whatever, right? And that sort of spins off into something. But what if it was that same thing, but there was like another kind of pull from something else that was kind of from another deeper storyline that we hadn't necessarily read about, or this
now you're just
writer's
describing Grant Morrison's Batman.
Well, but like, I mean, sure, but like, then does that mean we can get the opportunity for more of those? I don't know. I think that the flexibility allows for a lot of trial and error, and I think that it's an interesting concept. I just think from a sales perspective, it's interesting that they would remove continuity altogether, because you're right, it is kind of like a double dip, especially with the Black Label stuff and some of the stuff we've been seeing with like Young Animal. If they're going like all in on this, cool. I'm interested to see how it pans out, and hopefully, to your point, Phil, it does, and it works well with this looser continuity. But I think there's a lot of advantages to it, but at the same time, from a sales perspective, there is a lot of disadvantages.
We talked about it in the context of DCU, or at least I brought that up. But honestly, it goes back to the New 52 too, where they they started over and they wanted to have, they kind of picked and choose which things in continuity they liked for certain characters, specifically Green Lantern and Batman. And I said, this is what happened.
I love that you brought up the New 52, and I'm so glad you did, because that is an example of two things. One, DC did a terrible job.
Right.
With that relaunch.
Yep.
They dropped the ball big time in terms of delivering the message on what it really was. And they also did a terrible job of explaining why Batman had some things that stuck, but others that didn't. And, other characters were completely new.
Yep.
They did a really bad job. But the other thing that the New 52 showed, and this is, of course, 10 years ago. And so,
God.
It's not 10 years ago. It's almost 10 years ago.
No, it's 2012, dog.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's 2020 now.
It's almost 2021.
Get in the weeds. Let Sean make his point.
Yes.
So what it also showed was that fans rejected that by and large. Even though the New 52's initial sales were very high, put yourself back in that time period, there were a lot of people who were very upset about the New 52 and how it erased certain pieces of the continuity from the pre-Flashpoint era that people really enjoyed and wanted to see continue. And you can easily have that happen again. That was DC's biggest attempt yet at doing something like this, and it failed.
So
that's so funny. I came in the New 52, and that was the exciting bit of it, was that I didn't have to worry about that stuff.
Mm-hmm. There will always be people like you when that happens, when that kind of thing happens.
Sweet summer child.
Yeah,
You
right.
just
It's
stop
like
it. There will always be people like you.
it's an
I even mean
opportunity
that
for
in
a
a
new
negative
generation
way.
of readers too.
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
So I think the thing that's interesting to me is that like I don't think it's a clean answer whether it's good or bad, right? And I think that we can all agree on that. I think there are clear pros and cons to this approach. But I think the thing that's so interesting to me is we talked about this 2 weeks ago. I don't remember which listener wrote in with this question, but it was like talking about how do you judge what books matter? And I think it's funny that we as a community get so some of us anyway, right? Get so wrapped up in continuity and what matters and what doesn't. But you see that all the time, right? The New 52 is a great example where all continuity was thrown away. How is that really any different than this? And I think what we'll probably see is an evolution to see more books like something like Spider-Man Blue, right? Which takes place outside of continuity, but it's entirely informed by the history of a specific era of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And that book feels like a book or a set of characters that has history and feels lived in, but it doesn't have to be in the confines of what's going on in Amazing Spider-Man the year that it came out, right? Or I think about, I believe it was with Rebirth. You DC guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but was around the time when Bendis was taking over Superman, right? And there had been that era of Superman is a family man and he has a child, and that was really popular and a lot of people liked that. And then because
Convergence.
I'm sorry?
That came out of Convergence.
Convergence, thank you for the correction there. So think about that, right? Where there's a huge number of readers at that point who are like, this is what I want. This is what I want out of Superman stories. But because it was time for Bendis' era to come in, they do a bunch of well, let's send them off into space and do this and tie up ends so that we can move on to the next thing. And I think you have the ability in this model to not do that, right? And if there is an audience that wants this version of Clark and Lois and John, that can continue forward without limiting your ability to have some other writer come in and do their Superman, or tell their Superman story.
It can't continue forward because there's no continuity.
But there can be self-contained continuity.
There can be, but if I'm writing Superman and I say, okay, he has no family, and then my 12-issue run ends, and then you come on and you say, okay, he has a family, then Phil's run happens and Phil says, okay, he has no family. Then Cale's run happens and he says, okay, he has a family, but John died. And then Marco says, okay, he has no family. There's no through line. There's just whoever's up next says this is what it is, and that's it.
It's basically writing for graphic novels. That's what this is. When you do a graphic novel format for a story, non-continuity, you establish the things that are in continuity in that narrative. So this is a thing that can only honestly, this has kind of been how I've approached reading comics the last 5, 6, 7 years anyway, where it's okay, well, this is this writer's and artist continuity to this story. Because it's already they're going to try to play it by their own rules for writing whatever title anyway.
Yeah, because think about what we're doing with X-Men right now. How much does there was the Rosenberg one was right before that, right? And I know that was kind of not super warmly received by a lot of people. And it's how much is what was happening in that book impacting what's going on right now?
It isn't. It informs it in the sense that you saw the desperation of X-Men and why something like this would be necessary.
Sure.
So if you were to read that, that's what you would get out of it. But the biggest problem that I have with this kind of speaks to what you just said, which is that this is forcing something that comics already have solutions for. Comics have built-in solutions to the problem of continuity. And for whatever reason, DC, the brass, seem to think that they have to solve it in a hard way. And I don't agree. Who cares what happened before House and Powers? You could know, but you could also not know. And in this instance, it's not going to terribly impact your ability to read the book if you don't. That's not always true, but you can look to several different regime changes. I'm trying to think of a good example. Okay, when Thor was dead, and then J. Michael Straczynski brought Thor back, you don't really need to know how he died. You just need to know he was dead and now he's not.
How he came back. It's the same thing
Exactly.
with Green Lantern and Jeff Johns.
Right.
How Jordan, I mean.
Exactly. I think that, and again, I personally believe this is more of a DC problem. They overestimate what the average reader needs to know to read a book, and how often the lack of knowledge directly impacts whether or not someone is willing to buy it. I could see that with like Batman number 47, because there's 46 other books you didn't read. But if you want to read Batman, and it happens to be the case that Scott Snyder's run is starting that week, I don't think that not knowing what happened 40 years ago is going to prevent you from buying that number one.
I think they're too concerned with the nerds on message boards that I used to be, fast forward 13 years ago, that get really upset when things don't line up. The problem is, especially with DC, they're really bad at lining things up anyway.
Well, and it's what we discussed with Sandman, and I assume you guys discussed it in Swamp Thing. It's a thing of like continuity is a good thing when it's a hint at a world that's lived in.
Yeah.
But now people are so sticky about it, and DC is so sticky about it that they've hoisted their own Picard.
So,
Right.
but to build off that point, though, right? Like, and I'm not arguing one way or the other. I'm raising this question for the group. Like, do you need continuity for a world to feel lived in? Because, like, we came into Swamp Thing, and I don't know what happened before that, to Sean's point. But I got the sense that there was history there because it was well written. Or, like, again, I made this kind of as a joke, but, like, think about, like, Kingdom Come, right? Like, I walk into this book, it's new, but it doesn't feel new. It feels like lived in, and it feels like the Superman that I know, whoever that is, to me as a reader, has had his day, and it ended, and now here's what he's going through now. And materially, it doesn't matter whether you've read All-Star Superman or watch the cartoon or whatever the fuck it is. Whoever Superman is to you, you pick up from here and move forward. And it's well written enough that you jive with it, right? And like I wonder how much that matters, right? Because it's like you ask the question of like with Batman, how many Robins have there been? Like, what does it mean? Blah blah blah. Look at like 3 Jokers. If 3 Jokers exists outside of continuity, right? Like they set up that it's these Jokers from these stories that you know, and Jason Todd is here, and this is the drama between them, and even if you don't know that history, it tells you what you need to know so that you can read and move forward. And, like, I wonder how much will that breakdown of the existing system matter if writers can just do that anyway and just give us, like, well, here are the players, and here's what they mean to each other, and if you want that backstory or where I'm pulling from, these are the books that influenced me, you know? I'm acknowledging The Killing Joke, or I'm acknowledging Year One, whatever.
2 points. So number one, you are referencing books that are written by the masters of the industry.
Sure.
So yeah, sure. You could say that Alan Moore could do that. Grant Morrison can do that.
Mark Waid can do that. Those are things that those creators are super talented at. You can't tell Jeff Johns anything he doesn't know about DC Comics. So he'll be able to pull that off. Not everybody is him, and not everybody is Grant. There are a lot of creators who won't be able to do the things that you're saying need to be done in order to make that effective. And that's a problem. Obviously, you're always going to have an issue of talent in the sense that not every writer is going to be able to do what Tom King can do, but that's why Tom King does what he does. You know, they're not going to entrust the Rorschach story that they're doing now to any creator. And
That's
there are
the
a lot
creator of
reasons
Heroes
for
in
that.
Crisis.
Well, hey, listen. Um, that's my first point. My second point is that stories like Kingdom Come feel special because they're outside of the norm. When every story is trying to do that, but not every creator is Alex Ross and Mark Waid, what happens then? I'm not saying trying to tell the literal Kingdom Come story. I'm saying telling stories that are outside of continuity that try to feel special.
Yeah.
Then they don't feel special. And now it's like, okay, so what do we really have here if every single year there's a new Wonder Woman story that blows up what happened before, not in a way of like, all right, that happened, here's what's happening next, in a way of like, that did not happen, here's what's happening now. That's not the same thing.
But like, do you think it has to be that way? Because I wonder, right? Like, you think about, use the Wonder Woman example, right? Say that there's this run, and then we get to the next one, and it is kind of like more anthological, right? Where it's like you pick up, and it's like, here's Wonder Woman, and we know who Wonder Woman is. Here's the next adventure. Like, runs between each other don't always communicate anyway, right? Like, you take it back to the X-Men thing. You could read the Rosenberg run and see how it informs what leads to Hoxpox. Couldn't you make that same argument about like runs between writers that are one after the other of like, well, this was what Wonder Woman got out of this and taking it into this, like, you know, this is how this character's, you know, interacting with this problem.
You could say that, but for 15 years before House of Powers, the X-Men continuity was very tightly wound.
Sure.
So, like, and there are a lot of books you can point to where that is true, where like Daredevil continuity is tightly wound.
Mm-hmm.
Things matter that happened like a very long time ago, and you can still read it and you can still get something out of it. But if you understand what came before, it enhances what's happening now because they do reference things from X years ago.
Yeah.
And the X-Men books we're reading right now reference things from X years ago. We don't always catch them if we're not inclined, but they're there, you know, like Jumbo Carnation. That was such a he's the fashion designer. If you don't know who he is, all you know is that he's a fashion designer. If you know who he is and you read Grant Morrison's book, then his presence there adds so much more to his to it.
But couldn't you argue that could work with these books too?
No, because they're not referencing continuity. They're acting as if nothing happened. Like they're saying, so again, it's like if you don't have continuity, then did the Joker kill the Red Hood? Does that factor when Batman and the Joker face, or did he kill Jason Todd?
And in the Jumbo Carnation example, you know, in Hoxpox, the Jumbo Carnation we met, assuming the continuity is, you know, the way DC wants it to be, the Jumbo Carnation in a Hoxpox could be me. Like it could be anybody.
Exactly.
But if you're picking and choosing the continuity, why couldn't you just say that is the one from that Grant Morrison run? Like why do you have to disassociate them if that's the illusion?
You don't have to, but if there's nothing, okay. Shoot, I had a good example. Okay, you don't have to. You could assume it's the, like, let's say it's DC. You could assume that's the Jumbo Carnation from Grant Morrison's X-Men, and all the things that happened to him in that book happened to him, to that character. Right. But Jumbo Carnation is a character who literally has one story. What about Gwen Stacy? What about Mary Jane? What about Alfred? Did Alfred die in Tom King's Batman? When you read whoever's writing it now, because that matters. It matters if Alfred died
in Tom King's Batman.
Yeah, he did.
Oh shit!
Fuck me. No wonder I don't like Tom King.
That, like, those are important things. And if the writer says, no, actually, that's not important, that doesn't matter, then cool, fine, it doesn't matter. But I as the reader, have to figure that out.
Well,
I also think,
and I think that comes back to the talent thing, right? Where it's like you're going to have to put that faith in the writer, but like, and maybe that's the answer to the problem, right? Is that like there's less room for writers that don't have that ability with this kind of storytelling approach. But like, I think of something like Spider-Verse too, right? Where like, look at the opening scenes of Spider-Verse, right? Where they establish the Peter Parker who dies in the beginning of Miles's universe. They connect him to the Sony Spider-Man trilogy, but then they also connect him to like the 90s cartoon and like elements of Amazing Spider-Man and all these other things that like, again, like to me as a Spider-Man fan who knows about that shit, I'm like, oh, I had that toy in the 90s. That's really cool. Or, oh, that's that scene from the movie. But if you don't know, it tells you what you need to know, you know, and it gives you that groundwork so that you can move forward.
It's like kind of anything else that seems to be happening in pop culture these days. There's this like kind of strange consensus of like the meaningful things that have happened in whatever media the last 40 years. And that's the stuff that is kind of absorbed through continuity of whatever medium. So like for Batman, it hits like all the primary story points that like a basic Batman fan would know, and then ignores the rest. In the 80s, you know, you go back and read Frank Miller's Daredevil run, for instance, you know, it will, you know, weave through our established continuity as if every story that's taken place before has really happened. But nowadays, everything is so loose. This just kind of feels like the next step where it's like, okay, you want to talk about continuity? The continuity that we have is just the things that you probably already know about, and we'll move on.
But where are you seeing this looseness? Because I'm not seeing it, and I read comics every single week.
Well, I think a good example was that Bendis thing. It kind of loosely referenced what happened with Gleason and what's his name before Bendis took over. I'm blanking on his name. Gleason did the art.
Tomasi.
Yes, Tomasi. But it was very loose with like kind of those story threads that were left off in Tomasi's run. Maybe these things. No, like, it used to be if a book would reset at issue 1, that's when we could presume that looser continuity based on what happened before. But I feel like this is, at least with DC, when a writer picks up after another writer, they kind of just do what they want to do and loosely reference what happened before.
So, one, I wanted to hit on this earlier, but since you brought it around, I think that's one of the important tools that Sean was talking about earlier. A writer who is just going to change it up and is going to ignore, like, DC has tools for that. They've had tools for that for 50 some odd years. And it's weird that they don't trust it anymore. The other thing is this is also physically tangible. In the front of literally every comic you can pick up on the stands is the previously on page.
Sure.
Where it tells you exactly what you need to know to pick up this book. Like,
but to Phil's point though, right? Like, because I think what's interesting about this conversation, right, is like we're darting back and forth with examples about how things worked like 40 years ago versus 15 years ago versus now. And like, I think it used to be a little bit more clear, you know, and maybe that's just because there was less history and there was less, you know, like reboots and stuff like that too. But like, I do think that we've discussed and agreed that coming in as a new reader and understanding what matters and what doesn't isn't easy. Like I know like when Hoxpox was coming out, I had mentioned at the time, like anecdotally, one of my coworkers who watched the X-Men cartoon growing up was like, I really want to read this X-Men. What do I have to know? And like, you didn't really have to know anything, but you also kind of do. And like that, oh, we good? Okay. I think that is kind of problematic. And I think like when you look at like Batman, and to Phil's point, right, like what are like the most iconic Batman stories? It not necessarily that they all happened outside of continuity, but like they're things that feel more self-contained. And I wonder if we might not be able to see like more of a return to kind of like Silver Age storytelling, where it is like more episodic. you know, and it is more like this time on Batman rather than previously, now here's what's happening, you know, and like, I don't know, like I definitely hear what you guys are saying, and I'm not really sticking my flag in either camp. I think the conversation is interesting of like, there's so many hypotheticals in terms of how writers will approach this and how much it'll matter. That like, I don't know, like why couldn't we see, you know, like if there's multiple Batman books on the rack at a time and they're all engaged with a different corner, a different time period, whatever, different rules. I don't know that one necessarily has to come at the total sacrifice of the other. And I'm interested to see how that actually comes together in practice.
Yeah, but building on that point, like I don't think that it'll mean the continuity filled comics will no longer exist, because I'm sure there's somebody who wants to tell that kind of story, whether or not they can manipulate the continuity in any effective way. Somebody's going to want to tell a story that has that longer continuity, and somebody's going to want to tell a story where they don't, where they can pick and choose however they like. And I think to your point, Pete, I as you were laying that out, I think that there is a like a DC initiative, especially in this, where I can see both of those things happening concurrently, where we'll have the one story that goes on for like 2 years that all references back to itself, because that's a version of that kind of a story that these creators want to tell, whether or not they switch arcs or teams or whatever have you. But I think that structure is viable. Both structures are viable in this scenario.
And you know what? You're so right. And how do we know this? Well, DC has Black Label, where they're already doing this.
Or when they used to do Elseworlds.
Or when they used to do Elseworlds.
Or Young Animal.
Or Young Animal.
Or All-Star.
Or Vertigo.
In fact, the only time that I can think of where this didn't work in my lifetime was when they tried to force that on the mainline titles.
Yep.
With the New 52.
Fair play.
And that's my overall take on this is I'll believe it when I see it, and I'm sure I'll be part of the sales that shoot them back into the charts when they bring back continuity.
Exactly. I'm in the same boat. This feels pointless. And I think it undermines the efforts in the Black Label space, because now that doesn't feel relevant. But there is one last thing I wanted to add to this, and I know we gotta get into our reviews. But I read a rumor from Bleeding Cool a while ago, and I kept it in my back pocket, but it feels super relevant now. I read a rumor that DC is tightening their belt and will no longer be paying creators the top dollar that they're known for.
Right.
Ooh, shit.
A big reason why creators like Grant Morrison and Tom King jump ship from Marvel over to DC is because DC paid better. And
Maybe.
I read that will not be happening anymore. That is why Scott Snyder is doing his own thing elsewhere. That's why Grant Morrison is leaving DC after the Green Lantern season 2. And I read that Tom King's last major DC run will be the Batcat stuff.
Dude, Marvel's about to come up.
More?
I bet we see Bendis leave too.
Imagine
'Cause
again.
he was
So I guess there is a silver lining.
he was making bank at Marvel. Like, and again, not to use Pete's overused journalism term anecdotally. I spoke with a creator while I was in school who
Piece of shit.
you said it 30 times in this fucking segment.
Hey,
Don't
hey.
What do you want me to call it? Circumstantial, then
Conversation.
fine.
At least he didn't say continuity or whatever. he said.
You can't even
Nah,
replicate
I got
that.
razzed on that
Can't
YouTube
mispronounce
video long enough.
Continuity.
Continuity.
Yeah, whatever. Fuck you guys.
Carry on.
A creator that had worked for Marvel at the time that Bendis did, lives in the town where I went to school. So one of the big draws of the comic book program in my school was to get to talk to this guy. He's a giant asshole. But he was saying that Bendis was pulling like $500 a page.
Oh my God.
That's really nice.
And even if that's exaggerated, like think about the level of creator that Bendis is. That,
Right.
like it or not, he's top guy.
That's why he was writing 7,000 books at the same time.
Yeah, right.
dude.
Jesus Christ, you're making $500 a page. He's like, yeah, I don't. Fucking Luke Cage walks down the street. There you go. Give me my money.
DC's gonna take that away. He's gonna walk his happy ass right back to Marvel.
Yeah, or he'll go to Image.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
The reason I brought that up is because I could see that this could be something that's related to that. Hey, we don't have access to the masters anymore. Let's make looser stories. Hopefully people show up for the fact that these are more accessible. And maybe, hey, we have Batman. Who cares who's writing Batman? It's Batman. Put whoever on it and let them tell the story that they feel like telling, and let that be that. The problem with that is that we already saw that when Tom King's run was, getting a lot of shaky reviews and people were unhappy, it was being outsold by Immortal Hulk, which never should have happened, and was a direct result of that was Tom King being taken off of Batman ahead of schedule.
Right.
That shows you that no matter how much DC wants to act like their characters are Teflon and will sell no matter what, it ain't true.
It's interesting to think, and this is my last thought on this, to think like maybe that is part of the reasoning too, is like, okay, we're going to start paying less and offer more creative freedom, where it's like, yeah, maybe I'll make less writing Superman or Batman, but I've always wanted to write this Superman story, so I'll do it and take a slightly, a lesser payday than I could get at Marvel.
And that's still a career maker.
Right, exactly. If you write a great Superman or a great Batman story, that could give you the juice to then buy for a better contract at Marvel, or go pick up, go launch your Image book with that heat or whatever. And like that is an interesting wrinkle to this conversation for sure.
Well, that's going to be a big deal, and I think a big conversation piece when DC does finally announce this change. If they announce this change, look for it to come after Future State for sure. Be very, very mindful of what DC says and does in the post-Future State world. And let us know if a continuity-less DC universe is a place that you want to live. Do you want to buy your books if you know that there is not going to be the same kind of stickiness that you're used to? Does that matter to you? We want to hear it from you guys. So write in comicspals@gmail.com and let us know your thoughts. Now we're going to jump into our reviews, starting with X-Men number 14. All right, so we're going to finish up with our reviews here. We're going to start with X-Men number 14. This is chapter 12 of 10 of Swords. This is Hickman, of course, with Mahmoud Asrar. And Lanil Yu is also credited because Marvel did some funny things with his artwork. Sonny Go on colors, Clayton Cowles is always on letters, and Tom Muller, the perfectly amazing designer of all of the infographics. So this issue sees us picking right up after the huge revelation in Ten of Swords Stasis, where we learned that Apocalypse's wife, Genesis, is still alive, that she actually didn't die, and that she just took on the mantle of Amenth, the helmet, and she switched sides. So this is just one big conversation, and we're kind of seeing And this is what I meant by Marvel doing funny stuff with the new use art. We're seeing a lot of the stuff we've already seen, but from her perspective now. And so they actually reused a lot of Lanil Yu's art, repurposed it, and we're seeing different angles to it. As she explains, her journey to joining the other side. And so what did you guys make of this chapter in the story?
It's weak, man.
Phil was already making a face about it, and I'm like, yup.
It was
Because
weak.
I was really frustrated by this issue.
It was
Like,
just yeah, good, Cale.
Yeah, well, very, very. I think I've been pretty vocal about how I like the way things are going. I sat down to read these books, and I went, "Fuck! All right, come on, let's go."
Yeah, right. That was my big takeaway. Was like I was sitting there reading it, and it took me like probably a page or so before I realized that it was like the same thing I had already seen like entirely, not just that it was like because I figured it was gonna be here's more to that story, right? Like here's more that context that you didn't have before, and like yeah, that's what it is, but like it's literally same pages, some of the same dialogue, like some of the same exact wording and everything. And for this to be the third issue that feels like it's like let's go back in time and give you a big info dump about what happened. It's like, really? The third fucking issue of 22 that's going to do this? Like, I didn't, like, yeah, sure, we got different angles, and like at the very end you get context that's like much different and matters, but like, fuck, could we have skipped the first one then?
The placement is weird. Usually when we have a revelation like this, why? I don't understand why we found this out last week that she's still alive and is on the other side. Like, why couldn't that wait a little closer to the climax? That should have been like a giant reveal, I feel like. But fine, we chose not to do that. That's okay. So the first half of her narrative is a very much a, as you know, Apocalypse, we were married and we had kids. And it's like, bro, I guarantee he didn't forget that. My man sunk. Okay? Like, you're in him forever. And like, you're expositing this stuff he knows. Second half, okay, yeah, you're going into like how things changed. That's fine. Man, why are you expositing information at a character that knows all this? That's such hackneyed writing. Like, if we're going to do expository dialogue, at least make it, like, at least tell it to someone who doesn't know all this. Like, Apocalypse knows all this. Secondly, you got to be more creative than this in expositing all this information. And I think it would have played better later. You could have had it in the high octane, like, parts of the story and use it to slow down and space it out more. Like, we're still in the preliminary story. We're in the prologue, more or less, still of the story.
And like, I think it's made worse by the fact that it happens in X-Men again, because like I could understand having an issue like this if it was with the conceit of, well, you probably haven't read every issue of this, so maybe you missed the first time that this information was dropped. But it was like 2 or 3 issues ago in X-Men that we got this conversation between Summoner and Apocalypse. Like, it's like, if you're only reading X-Men, you just fucking read this.
Yeah.
Well, and also they're with this event, if you want to follow this event, like, they have it mapped out for you so that you can follow it easily and get every single thing you need. But they're giving us the same thing 3 times.
And like, I would even feel differently about it if it was like here's a recap of all of the things that happen in the side stories or whatever, in case you're not reading them, right? Because then at least I could justify it and be like, this serves a purpose for a certain kind of reader. And it might not be for us because we're up on everything, but whatever. For me, it's like, who is this for? Like, what does this add? Yeah, there's new information, but like, fucking don't give me all that information in X-Men 12 or whatever it was, and give me it now. And it would be interesting. And it would be like, oh, the calm before the storm and this major reveal and oh my God. But now it's just like, we know all this fucking information, and I feel like we've been fucking twiddling our thumbs waiting for the goddamn fight to happen already, and And then there's another issue this week that is again postponing the actual action that we've been building to for now 13 issues.
And which we know will continue next week.
Sean, what do you think?
I'm not surprised that you guys felt so negatively about this issue. I definitely wasn't. I definitely was not as negative about this one. First of all, I don't agree that they showed us or told us the same stuff that we already know. And I definitely don't agree that Apocalypse knew these things because he couldn't have known them.
He knew some of the stuff in the beginning of the narrative as well.
He knew the first 2 pages or so of the narrative. From the point at which she talks about the lies that have been circulated about why he left, that's where every single thing is new. And I was very interested in her journey, Genesis's journey, and how she got to have the Annihilation Helm, and why. I think it colors this story a little bit differently because this isn't what she wants to do. She's enthralled by the power of this helmet, and I love that.
And
As to
involved by
why
the power of the pussy.
As to why this came now as opposed to later, this revelation, like Phil brought up, I think it adds a different dynamic going into the battle that Apocalypse is going to have. Is he willing to kill his wife? That's a huge issue now, because winning this is going to mean ending what he was fighting for. The reason he wanted to do this was for revenge for the death of his wife and to reunite the mutants. But as it turns out, his wife is alive and the mutants are down with what she's down for. So is he still as fervently willing to defend Krakoa and his mutants when his real mutants are on the other side of the battle? I think that's very compelling. And if it had come later, we wouldn't get that during the fighting that's presumably coming in the next couple of issues. Also, I really, really liked some of what I thought were allusions to how what happened on Araco is not a reverse, but it's very similar to the story we've been following since House and Powers. So I'm going to point to a couple of things that make me feel that way. Genesis talks about the Idyll,
Sure.
who is a mutant prophet. I believe that mutant prophet is an analog for Moira McTaggart. The mutant prophet says that it saw their defeat in the future, just like Moira saw the defeat of the mutants in their own timeline. That colored the way that the mutants pressed forward on Araco, similar to how the X-Men did different things because of Moira. They also reference mutant breeding chambers, or they were like genetically messing with mutants.
They're having them breed with the demons or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah, menth.
Right, which is not the same, but it's similar to what Mr. Sinister ends up doing in House and Powers with the kennels, and that of course gets taken over by he betrays them, and that gets taken over by Nimrod. So I really liked those elements of it too, where it felt like, it's kind of like, it's like poetry. It sort of rhymes, kind of like Star Wars thing. Also, finally, before I turn, I really, really like the conversation where we're actually seeing Apocalypse and Genesis together. I really like the conversation because she clearly still feels for him, but she really just has to do what she has to do. And he doesn't want the smoke, but he also kind of knows what he has to do.
Yeah.
I like, he's like, It's not yours to take, my love.
Yes.
We have built something there for all mutants. That includes our children and you. And she's like, basically like, yeah, that's cool, but you guys are soft.
Yeah.
It's not going to survive.
You're a man
You
of
are.
peace? How far are you fallen?
You a weak ass bitch.
Compare Krakoa and Arakko to each other. Look at the development of Krakoa. Krakoa was developed as a safe haven. Arakko is a world of war. It's so perfect and beautiful how this was put together. I love it.
It's a bizarro Krakoa is basically what's happening here.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're not so different, you and I, except we're the opposite.
Marco, how about you, man?
I agree with a lot what you laid down. I like this issue. I do think that it adds a lot of it adds a larger twist to the story that we were initially told in the previous issues. And I think, to your point, it's compelling that Genesis switches sides because she's looking out for the best interests of her mutants the same way that Apocalypse is. And what do you do when those two forces have to end up meeting because they're just doing what needs to be done? And that's something that Apocalypse has always been about. He's just there to push forward what he thinks is ultimately correct, and he does it by any means. But this is literally his wife, somebody that he's loved and has a relationship with, and it's deep. And what does he have to do now to combat that, especially considering she's coming at him with the same force, and he's grappling with his relationship with her, whereas she's obviously not necessarily moved on, but she's wrestled with the fact of what has to be done, and he's still in the process of doing that.
Yeah, like her resolve is there, right? Like
Yes.
she's ready for the next step, whereas like he's still in the conversation that Sean referenced, right? Like he's still trying to like argue with her, right? Like he's like, you can fight it. We don't have to do this way. Like we can still come together or whatever. And she's just like, nah, like that is no longer an option.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what ultimately this story is going to be. I'm not saying that this issue had no purpose. I'm just saying it probably could have been delivered better. But what this story is ultimately going to be about is, it's going to test Apocalypse's resolve. He's been questioned by readers since Hoxpox #1. Can we trust Apocalypse? Has he, why is he here? And now his resolve is going to be tested. Is he truly a villain that's going to lead to, the end of Krakoa as we know it, or is he good? He's a wild card. So that's what he's our central focus in all this.
And I think he's also like, can he trust himself? Because he was so convinced that this is the path that he had to go down. Like this was the information he had. He was sure. And now he's like, well, wait a minute. I have to rethink everything. Like the purpose for which I was trying to, for what this mission was for, is now that's been thrown out the window. So like, what do I do? How do I pivot? How do I figure out what I actually need to be doing in order to attain my end goal? And what even is that end goal now?
Yeah, I mean,
That's the way.
to me, I feel like this is going to be the completion of his face turn. You know, where it's going to be the death of his old family, the sacrifice of his old family and his old goals for the new future that he has been key in creating for mutant kind. Like, and to me, that panel that Sean called out, like when he goes, we, he sees himself as one of them. He sees the mutant people of Krakoa as his people in the same way that he saw the people of Arakko as his people before, and I think that's going to be the major takeaway from this entire conflict.
And I think that he's like everything that Hickman's been writing about Apocalypse and like all the characterization is leading up to, he's obviously going to make the call in favor of the New Mutants, because he grew up in a place of war. He understands what war does. He understands the downsides of it, and this new world that he's built in Krakoa, where he has put down the sword, where he is finally trying to reach another, like, I guess, level in society, or create some sort of society idealistically. I think that he's not afraid to sacrifice his family for that.
I I'm really compelled, and I hope they play on this. The fact that this is Genesis, but it's also not.
Mm.
Like, she's controlled by the Annihilation helmet.
Yeah.
Right.
She has to do this. It's the will of the helmet, not necessarily her will only. And it works because she's clearly the person who has the, survival of the fittest mentality, the way that Apocalypse was always shown to have. She's the one who really has that thought process, and she always has. But her wanting of Krakoa, it's kind of like a nihilist, where,
Annihilus.
yeah, he's got the cosmic control rod, and that's what controls the horde.
That's right.
And if he didn't do that, if that wasn't a thing, they would just raise the universe. And it's similar to the Amenthi demons, where if there is no one who's wearing the helmet, then that's what will happen. And so she has this responsibility now of keeping these demons in line. But what's really happening is that she kind of wants the same type of destruction that they do. And I'm really intrigued by how that's going to play out.
Is that an analog? Is she an analog instead of being an analog of Apocalypse? Is she an analog of Xavier? Think about exactly what you just said, Sean, about her cool hat, and how Xavier now has a cool hat. And all throughout this history that's being revealed to us from Genesis' point of view, and what her cool hat does, that's what Cerebro has always done for mutants with Xavier. And he's the person that has to sort of keep them in line because he's got the cool hat. It makes me wonder as well, since since I'm on the subject of analogs, what will Arakko do in this war to either be with Krakoa or see that they're not the same anymore? We know that Krakoa and Arakko are trying to fight to be together, but similar to Apocalypse and Genesis, are they on the same wavelength still, or?
I think so. To answer your last question first, I think that Krakoa and Arakko are on the same page. Arakko seems like it's almost like the only part of this that it's down for is the reuniting with Krakoa. I don't think Arakko really cares about anybody else. That's whatever anyone's doing.
If I recall, it was kind of upset about her voice or whatever.
It was crying.
Yeah, about her voice taking up the battle, or seemed to be.
Yeah. So that's my answer to that. But the other thing you were
same with Krakoa and Cypher.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Totally. And to your idea of Genesis being Xavier, well, okay. So Xavier's approached by Moira with a doomsday future.
Mm-hmm.
Genesis is approached by Ideal with a doomsday future. Both of them put on a helmet that they don't really ever take off. She teams up with her enemies to prevent the end of mutant kind. She sacrifices what she believes in for this to prevent the end of mutants. Professor Xavier gives up on his dream of human and mutant coexistence in order to preserve mutant life. The mutants of Arakko accept this new world order the same way that the mutants of Krakoa accept Professor X's idea of what they have to do for the future. So I see a lot of similarities there.
Well, and I think to adding to that, if there is if Amenth is the driving force behind what is going on with Genesis and Araco, then is it possible? Because Cerebro has some sort of like nanotechnology, and it has what is the technological society stuff that pops up?
Technarchy.
The
That yeah,
Technarchy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that then potentially what the Technarchy maybe somewhat has like invaded Cerebro and is the evil force or the driving force that is then pushing whatever Xavier's agenda is currently?
So, in the part of the issue where it talks about where she goes to, the Ivory Spire, the stronghold of the long lost white sword, purity, mutant purity. That's what the Technarchy in the far flung future is trying to get, right? In the next page, they say to say that the millennia that has passed changed him, being the guy that has the white sword, whose name I can't remember.
The
I
dude
think
who
that is
leads
his
the
name.
100 warriors of
Yeah.
Araco.
To say the millennia that had passed changed him is to sound like a fool. The death and resurrection cycle he lived each day had become his religion. To us, he was as alien as the horde he raged against, and we the same to him.
I came into this conversation prepared to talk about this exact thing, and I totally forgot the white sword is part of this. Yes, absolutely. The white sword is the system of resurrection that exists on Krakoa, which is fueled by Xavier. The
Right.
white sword is that. Absolutely. That's why I love this issue so much.
Yeah.
Because it's now expanding on the story by adding Krakoa and kind of saying, okay, Krakoa is what's going on Araco rather is a version of everything we've already seen the mutants going through that are now in Krakoa. I think that's so awesome.
Yeah.
One thing that I was thinking of based on what Cale brought up there is it's interesting to me that there are obviously all these parallels, but I think a lot of them are like these kind of like weird mirror, like twisted mirror images of each other. Because the comparison you brought up between Charles and oh my god, Genesis? Thank you. Genesis talks about how she doesn't heed the warning, right? And that like she's arrogant about it and like perceives their strength as being more than whatever obstacle that they could face. And you see Charles make the opposite decision, right?
This time.
But like
This time, right?
wait.
Yes, this time.
But even more than that, one of the underlying storylines is that Professor Xavier and Magneto are arrogant about the fact that they feel like they're the ones who have created everything that's happening now, and the success is due to them. And Moira felt alienated. That's something that's specifically referenced in House and Powers. She writes the infographics, and she talks about the arrogance of those men.
yeah.
And that she believes that will ultimately lead to their downfall. It's the same thing.
It's interesting.
It isn't that I didn't like the content of this issue. Marauders is what I had the bigger problem with.
Okay.
But like this fell, I think, to what Pete was saying, this fell in a place where I'm like, fuck, okay, let's go. And so, I think that's where I'm at with this, is just like, it is tremendous. And especially since we're talking about it and putting all this stuff together, like I did enjoy the content and I did see a lot of the stuff that was there. Did you guys see the crosses?
X's?
Those are like Morlock crosses.
Where
There's an old X-Men story where like Wolverine or someone is crucified on one of those.
Oh yeah, same.
I don't. When did that happen in the story?
It's a flashback.
Oh, yeah.
I got it.
Okay.
These, like the
Yeah,
cross things.
yes.
Oh,
Anyway,
That's interesting. It's funny because I definitely agree with what you're putting down there, Cale, where like reading this issue, like I was frustrated by it, and I like it more after this conversation.
It was
Well,
still mediocre.
I liked
agree, but
Yeah, I liked it as I was reading it, but again, like it's like we were saying, like I would like to be moving now. Let's go.
so the only downside I felt for this issue was that this speaks to what I was saying, what I've been saying, was I feel like this event is too long. This is a great issue in my opinion. It's a tie-in issue. It is not a main line issue. You don't need to know every single detail about why she's doing this. You need to know that she's alive and she's on the other side.
Yeah, that's 1,000% how I feel.
You can easily, this issue is skippable if the most important thing to you is getting to the meat. You don't have to read this. And in an event, there should not be any issues that are numbered issues of the event that are skippable. That's bad. You cannot have a 22 issue event where at this point for me, if you were asking me how many of these issues were like you need to see them,
Like 6
X-Men Creation, X-Men Stasis, and
Probably the last one.
Yeah,
X-Men
the last
Destruction or whatever.
Yeah. So far, I don't think anything we have read is you need to read this or you cannot understand the story. I just don't.
But is this like for Hickman? Do you not think an issue like this is the meat?
No, because none of the events that Hickman has spearheaded have had issues like this. Secret Wars did not have issues like this, and Infinity did not have issues like this. And both of those events were under 10 issues.
yeah, I guess it's just like for how much room there is, it feels like we should be doing more with it.
They added, this was originally I believe a 15 issue event before COVID. They added somewhere in the realm of 7 issues, and I can feel the stuffiness
the
of
padding.
it. Yeah. As far as art, normally we dive into the art as well. A lot of this is stuff that we've actually already seen.
Yeah.
And so we've already credited Lemieux Yu for how great he is. And there's no reason for us to go over it again.
Did that bother anybody? The reuse of the art? I honestly didn't notice.
I knew going into it, but I didn't care because it was it's I thought it was a cool thing where you're seeing something you already saw, but you didn't really know what you were looking at, and now you have a better idea.
Yeah, same. It was like recontextualized, so I thought it was fine.
I think it contributed to the exhaustion that I felt in this issue. I think like the complaint that it seems like mostly Phil and I are lobbing at it, like where I'm just like, okay, like we're spinning the tires again. Great.
Yeah.
I've seen this before. I know. I get it. And like, yeah, there's new information and new context that is important to the story. So I don't want to say that it's like meaningless, but I think I would have probably enjoyed it more if there was new art to go with it too, where it was like, oh, like the story you got before wasn't really the story, and here's what it really was, and like getting actual different looks at it, I think might have made me feel a little bit less fatigued by it.
All right, well, let's talk about a book that did not rehash art. Let's get into Marauders 14.
Pog.
Phil.
Pog, easy. You'll get your meal.
Okay.
So this issue is basically the calm before the storm.
Again.
No pun intended. Again, yes. Sort of the staging of everything before the big tournament kicks off. We get to see the sword bearers of Araco and the sword bearers of Krakoa interacting. Well, no, this is the first time.
Right.
All right, yeah, that's fair. You're right. You're right. That's fair.
Together.
And so it's kind of fun. You know, there are some interesting conversations. Pog and magic, not a pairing I thought I needed, but now I realize how mistaken I was.
It's the next big Tumblr ship.
Right.
And this issue does have some pretty important things in it, but I think we're about to have a conversation similar to the last one. How did you guys feel about this?
This one is okay. I
Really?
differ from Cale. This one is okay.
I agree.
I think a calm before the storm is totally fine.
Another one?
Well, this one doesn't. This one is okay because
There's new information and new things happen.
yeah, and it's interesting to see the representatives of Araco kind of intertwine now with our representatives from Krakoa. Like this makes them feel like people. Okay, like oftentimes in a tournament story, you know, the people that are facing off with our heroes are often just, you know, villains with no real background. And we don't really have a ton of background now, but they actually feel like, you know, they have motivations and they're people and stuff like that. So it's not really an anything issue, but I think of all the Calm Before the Storm issues we've had, this one feels the most narratively satisfying.
I agree.
Also, Pog or Pog.
Yeah,
So-
this was
Pog.
this one was okay. I it's interesting because like I feel like the last issue was more of that, and this was more of like a filler.
This is a filler for sure, but it's
Yeah.
okay. Is all I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was. Yeah,
Can we
it
just
was-
not use the word okay anymore?
Look,
Today?
it's okay.
It's fine.
It's
Okay.
okay.
Okay, Sean, we can.
It,
All
it
right,
was
okay.
It was fine in that like things happen that relate that like relate to the
And I gotta break out the thesaurus here.
The Theosaurus.
that they relate back to like the stuff that's been going on in overall with Saturnine, and I feel like that was repeated because we get that she has an ulterior motive. We're still trying to figure that piece out. Yeah, this issue didn't spark as much interest as the previous one. Like, sure, we learn small details about they're trying to strategize and they're trying to prepare for the fight, but I don't think it's consequential, or maybe not yet, at least.
So I don't disagree with anything you said, but I think this like just speaks to my sensibilities a little bit more and like what I want out of a story. Like if something's going to be filler, I'd like it to be character driven, because like sure, you can argue that outside of the last page, nothing of consequence happens in this issue, but like to the point that Sean alluded to, like there are fun character moments. You get to see characters who have never interacted before interact. You get to see characters who we literally only know through the context of like promotional material and then like one issue appearances where they have about a page worth of dialogue max, get to have conversations and like understand a little bit more about who they are and how they see this you know, this competition and all that stuff. Because I think without issues like this, you're going to go into the tournament and it's going to just be like the character that we know and like versus some mook. And like that's not as interesting.
Right, that's what I'm putting down.
So to me, like getting a little bit more time with like Pog, where we're like, oh yeah, we like Pog, he's funny, he's cool or whatever, like
He should win.
I don't know about that, but but it gives it to me anyway. It makes me feel like there's more skin in the game, and it's the same kind of criticism that like I remember reading a ton of in the back matter of like Walking Dead, where it's like nothing happened this issue, everybody's just standing around talking, and it's like right, but then when one of them dies, that means something, you know, rather than just being a body that a guy we already like is gonna fight. You know, like, what is that? Who cares? right? Because the ultimate takeaway, I think we can all probably agree, is that Krakoa will probably win. And that, Apocalypse will probably have to choose his new family over his old family, and that's the narrative meat. So then why are we going to read 8 issues of them fighting if we don't care about who they are or what, you know what I mean? Like, to me, it makes there be more stakes and more skin in the game rather than the last issue, which to me is like, it felt like almost like a different kind of filler where it's like, it feels like a bottle episode where it's like, let's reuse this old matter and recontextualize it so you get more information, but we don't really have to do that much. Whereas this, nothing moves forward or happens, but at least it's fresh. At least it's like beats that I haven't seen or like anticipated yet. Going into this issue, I didn't think it was going to be the dinner that they all go to before the tournament,
Right.
So that gave me moments that were unexpected, particularly the ending.
So go ahead.
Sorry. The other thing that came out of this for me was a new ship. And,
Oh, no.
I'd like to. Oh no!
What did you do?
I accidentally touched it and it moved the thing. I'd like to present.
I see Magic and who's she
Cable?
talking to?
Cable?
Oh wait, no, sorry,
Oh.
hold on. It should be this.
You're fucking blowing this, man.
Marco's Jeopardy all over again.
There it is. There's the ship. Fuck.
Oh my god, it's the third
Bro, it's
time.
not-
What are you
All right,
doing?
I'm gonna salvage this moment. Are we? All right, what do you got?
That's the ship.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Remember
that
this
was
is a
worth it.
podcast, guys.
It's
That was worth it.
Captain Avalon and Wolverine.
That was worth it. Okay.
I don't know
That's
if it
the
was.
ship.
I don't know. what it
Incredibly
was.
shippable.
Sean, what were you gonna say before this podcast was derailed?
So to me, this issue is not as good as X-Men 14, but it is relevant. It does feel like, and like if this were an event that didn't have 22 issues, this would be an issue that belongs because it's
Yes.
furthering the narrative in a material way. And that's what we have needed. On the Stasis review, we talked about the fact that these sword bearers of Araco don't have personalities yet that we're aware of. This
Yes.
issue did a great job of furthering that for, enough of them that I'm developing care. And that's the best thing I can say about this issue, that it does that. That's a very important element. I really appreciated seeing Magic and why am I
Gorgon?
blanking on his name? And Gorgon,
Oh, with the glass.
Oh yeah.
because they're not similar in any way, but the fact that they both love to fight and they're very, very good at it. So seeing two characters who otherwise wouldn't connect on that level, I thought was compelling. And everybody kind of trying to figure out like what's the weakness of
Yeah.
each different character was really cool. And the interaction between them and Iska was so great, where they're trying to figure out which hand she favors, and
Yeah.
they drop their glasses. Like, come on, man!
She just punks them.
And she completely punks them,
Not a
and
drop
she knows
spilled.
what they were trying to do, and it didn't work. And then such a subtle moment. Obviously, earlier in the issue, Magic and Pog have a little bit of interaction.
OTP?
And,
OTP? One True Pairing?
no. And Pog is a rhymer. And so when Iska tries to drop the glasses back on them, she says there's no such thing as going low with someone from Limbo. So she rhymed. I just love that.
That's what
little
lovers
moment.
do. They rhyme.
All right. It's like poetry and lovers. It rhymes.
So and like that's a great example, right? Like this is a character who we've now seen like 3 times, and literally the only defining characteristic that I could say about her was that she was Genesis's sister and that her power is that she can't lose. Okay. Now I got a sense of what her personality is.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Are we not? Are we sure Saturnine and Emma Frost aren't the same character? Have we ever seen them in the same room together?
Haven't, but I'm really aggravated because again, I feel like
She's too short.
Too short.
Well, and again, she's drawn exactly like any incarnation of Emma Frost. Like it
But-
doesn't.
She got
Look at
punked
the-
again.
Look at the page where Wolverine stands up. He's not shorter than her.
He's like 5'4".
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a Harlem Globetrotter.
She's like 6'9".
Yeah, dude. She could
Yeah.
dribble him like a ball.
I mean,
She's a
could it just be
9'6"
that
in my
she's
book.
just changing her size randomly? Like,
I think it's just some artists get it and
Yeah.
others don't. They don't understand the appeal of their own character. So with the conversation between
Sean's like, I love giant women, okay?
and I
Big
never have
Barda.
before. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. I do love Big Barda. Yeah,
Well,
those are
and
two of my
She-Hulk.
favorite. Oh yeah.
Gigantress.
now
Yeah.
name 3 more.
That's
Giant tigress.
Well,
Stature.
Stature. Great one.
Thanks.
What were we gonna say? The conversation between
Wolverine and Captain Avalon. I am so happy
that was good.
that Wolverine said what has been
everybody
on
was
my
thinking.
mind since it occurred. Captain Avalon is an asshole. Why did
The
he
team,
not?
buddy.
Why did he not just get with Saturnine?
Because
That's
Thinking
what
about it.
I said.
some people take their vows seriously, guys.
That's dumb as hell.
Bro, his wife ain't
fate of-
buying it.
The fate of the world is at stake, and you're gonna go ahead and stand on morals. Wolverine is the man, and I don't even like Wolverine, but he is completely correct. That was dumb.
You know, Captain Avalon goes to his wife and he's like, honey, the fate of reality was at it. Okay, Jamie, you sleep in the doghouse tonight.
Brian.
Brian.
I can't imagine saying that to my wife.
My wife.
Yeah? Well, I can't imagine the fate of the world resting on whether or not I screw a 6'9" woman. But if I'm in that position, I'm taking one for the team.
That's because she's 6'9", though.
Not
Yeah,
too
if she's only
no.
5'4", then Sean's not taking one for the team.
No, we do what we have to do in times of crisis.
I did like how when he confronts him about it, that he like contextualizes it through the younger mutants.
That was good.
I like that a lot because that felt very true to Wolverine's character for me.
Yeah.
You know, that like that's ultimately what he's all about. You know, is like,
The young people.
yeah, right. Is that like he kind of already is like, I'm fucked. Like I'm a lost cause. Like I've experienced all the pain and all the, like, it's not about a better life for me. It's about a better life for them.
Whoa, wait, guys, do you think Cale is the Arakan Wolverine? They're both old grandpas, but unlike Wolverine, Cale says the young people can go fuck off.
Cale doesn't
My
love
man-
anyone.
My man, you know Wolverine says that in public. He doesn't want them around him either. He's glad they're over there. He's glad they're having a good time. Let me drink my beer in peace. That's what Wolverine wants. That's what I want.
So you are Krakoan Wolverine.
Listen, you said it.
Bob?
So let's talk about one more scene before we get into the big finale. So towards the end, Storm is having a dance with Death, and
In the pale moonlight.
That's right. That's right.
it's a dance with the devil. It's a
Not 6
That's
months.
devil.
decent attempt. And this is one of the covers that we saw much earlier on, and that was at the time when we thought Storm was in the role of what Genesis ultimately is.
Yeah.
That was how they swerved us.
Mm.
So we didn't know what context this dance would be happening in, but now we do, and
Good.
it was all right.
It was
Hey,
good.
don't make a lick.
It don't make a lick. Is that what you
Hey,
said?
don't make a lick.
Okay.
Oh,
damn.
sense.
Yeah.
Texas.
Yeah, that was the.
No, at first I thought you said it don't make a lake, and I was like, well, yeah, it wasn't a lake.
They were in the ocean, dummy.
Yeah, right. That was where I thought we were going.
No, I didn't get it. Genuinely, I didn't get it.
I thought it was fine. It felt like kind of like like it kind of reminded me of some of the more cerebral stuff in like Swamp Thing or
Cerebro.
like Cerebro, or even like Sandman, where it like felt like it was supposed to be. It felt like it was supposed to be this like big moment that like had all these layers, and it just like felt like a little bit weird. It felt off to me.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like my critique isn't, oh, I didn't get it. It legitimately, I don't get it. Like, what is the point of what's happening here?
I think the point is that Storm is establishing that she's not
Right.
afraid.
Yeah.
She's not scared in this situation. And I think that's important for a character whose fate has really been in limbo in a lot of ways. You know, like I just said, we thought she was going to switch sides. She was infected by the the tech virus, not the techno organic virus, but some kind of tech virus. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And here she faces down death once again, as she has so many times, and she don't blink. And I really appreciated that aspect of this meeting between them. I don't think it was a revelation, but I do think that it gives us a conversation between two characters who definitely needed more development. Obviously, Death needed it. We don't know who the hell he is.
Yeah.
And Storm needed it because she has been underserved. And, you know, we need to know where she's at in her mind right now. And clearly, she has the resolve to get this done. And I'm happy with that.
Yeah, the Death was trying to intimidate, and she's just flexed. And she's like, fuck you, like fuck off. I'm good.
See, I thought it was interesting because I didn't even get the sense that Death was trying to intimidate her. Because who's the Flamehead one?
War.
I remember like in that first interaction with them, like War is kind of like trying to big time them or whatever, and she's just like, nah, like I'm not afraid of you. And I feel like when they have the dance or whatever, I feel like Death is more like intrigued by her than they are trying to like start shit, you know?
Sex and death go together.
I'm sorry?
Sex and death go together. They're having two conversations at once.
Sure.
There's a lot of innuendo involved, and if I'm not mistaken, was it in Stasis where her tarot card was death, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So like, there's something like this is a plot thread, you know, and
creation.
This
Stasis, she was leading an army.
Yeah, but didn't it say death on it or something?
On her card, it said death. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And this is it's not. I don't think this is meant to be flowery or anything like in a Sandman or whatever. I just think this is a plot thread because I think we're going to eventually see a payoff with Death and Storm. I don't know where it's going, but I thought it was good. This was a real good. To everything Sean's saying, this is a good character moment for both these characters to shine. And it's also weird, Dogman and flirting with Storm. I don't know what that's about, but that's okay.
So let's get into the end here.
Cale's a furry.
They sit down to eat, and Wolverine's sitting next to War. She roofies him, and but he don't care. He gets up to speak to Saturnine, and he's angry because
I thought you were 6'9".
I thought you were 9'6".
He's angry with her for a really good reason. And I'm, again, so glad that Wolverine is speaking the truth here. Like, why is she letting this happen? This doesn't need to happen. She can do anything. Why is she playing these games with their lives? It reminds me so much of the Beyonder from Secret Wars, where it's like, this is completely ridiculous. And she's not that far above them. No. She's not the Beyonder. She needed Captain Avalon. She wants him as a protector. If she still needs a protector, she ain't the Beyonder, and she doesn't have the right to act like this. And Wolverine wants to stop this whole thing, and he stabs her twice in the chest.
Hell yeah.
It makes so much sense when you're someone like Wolverine, who's just been through hell and back, literally in this story, to be the voice of reason. To be like, this shit's insane. It does not have to be like this. Whom among us, other than those that have seen the throes of battle firsthand, to realize how much of a massacre like that is coming, is as unnecessary as it is, you know?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I was surprised. I knew, well, this issue earlier on, it made it pretty clear that Wolverine wanted to kill her, but I was surprised that he was actually able to we don't know if she's dead.
That's
but
what I
he was
mean.
able to,
She keeps getting punked.
did someone just fart?
What's
It
that?
was like a plane or something.
There's an airplane in my
Oh.
Zoom. Sorry.
Okay.
That's fine.
That's
Yeah, I don't know. Like, to your point, Phil, like, yeah, it depends on what happens next, right? Like, if she's actually dead, sure. Yeah, I would agree with you, but like, she probably won't be, and I'm sure that there will
Yeah,
be consequences for that action. And
Y'all see the cover of Marauders 15?
no, I haven't
No.
looked at it.
Is it her grave?
No spoilers. No.
So yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I don't still feel that way necessarily, that she's like been too depowered, just because we'll see what actually happens here. But I did really appreciate that, and I think that throughout this issue, because Benjamin Percy co-wrote this one, right?
Yeah, it was Ben Percy and Jerry Duggan.
Yeah. I just feel like Benjamin Percy really gets Wolverine. And
Yeah.
like I think the characterization of him throughout this issue is really strong. Because this is exactly how I believe he would act in this situation, you know, and that like for someone whose life is so defined by violence, that he is in the position of, like Sean said, being the voice of reason and trying to like curtail needless, you know, loss of life and you know, like this like kind of like weird bloodlusty competition, you know. He's like fuck that. Like I'm not trying to be a gladiator here. Like fuck that. You know, like I'm trying to protect people.
Children.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that this was a perfect moment. I don't know if I definitely was banging that drum too, where I felt like she was devalued by the Captain Avalon interaction a few issues ago. I think here she's too powerful to die to Wolverine. I just don't believe that she's dead. I think this is more, you know, it's a shock, it's a surprise. I think it sets a tone. And she now has no reason to support or protect the X-Men in any way. So I wonder how this is going to affect her, because she's still the biggest wild card in this whole story.
What do you think the significance of the roofie is? Like, do you think that was just to show us that they were trying to cheat, or do you think that's actually going to come back around?
I kind of think it's the former, that it's trying to show that it's going to be dirty. Because like he didn't eat.
He's
Like
not going to
it-
sit
it,
back
you know,
down and eat after this, right?
He stabs her immediately after the roofie. So like he's already unhinged.
I actually feel like it's going to be exactly what you said, Pete. I think he is going to sit back down, because I don't think Saturnine is affected by this. I think she's going to get right up, tell him to know his place. He's going to sit his ass and he's going to eat that food, and he's going to be roofied, and then, you know, shenanigans. That's what I believe.
Okay. I honestly don't know. That's
Yeah.
why I wanted to just see what everybody thinks, because I'm not sure what I think is going to happen in regard to that.
Yeah.
Here's a controversial opinion. I think this was the best issue of Marauders.
Ever of all 14?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, sure. I don't know that I agree, but I like this issue, so let's chill. I did
Issue was.
I did finish it and think like, this really didn't need to be a Marauders issue. Like, this had nothing to do. Like, I guess it's because Storm is like technically the main character of it, I guess. But like,
Again, this event is silly. This should just be
its own
it should be its own thing,
Yeah.
right? There's no reason for it to be a Marauders issue.
Like, I would be fine if they kept the stories about them getting the swords to their own, like, oh, these are the tie-ins if you want to see how they got the swords or whatever. But like, yeah, I'm with you in that where like it feels super weird to be like telling these across all these books, but then like this doesn't feel like a Marauders issue in any way.
No, I mean it's the only person who's a part of the Marauders who is relevant is Storm, and she's certainly not the first or second most relevant person in this book. So
Like this could have just as easily been a Wolverine issue.
yeah. As far as the art goes, I think that it's cool. You know, we've talked about how a lot of the art across the spectrum of X books is the same, or at least very samey. And I don't think that this breaks the mold in any way. I think that the shortness of Saturnine, like the joke of it aside, is actually a problem. They need to figure out how tall she is and let her be that. It's really weird that she changes height every single time they show her. We've talked a lot about our issues with Caselli and Delgado on the art and colors, respectively. I don't feel like this issue necessarily changed how I feel. I still think Storm looks a little weird, and I don't understand what is the problem. Like, why can't they get her right? It's very strange.
The second page I thought was the worst drawing of Storm I've seen in this entire era. Where she says, "You are mistaken. It must be something else you smell."
Yeah.
That face is fucking weird and ugly. Like, it's just gawky and awkward.
Well, dude, if you smelled something that bad, your face would be ugly too.
She's just like,
Yeah, but you've been in his office.
it's true.
Panel wise, I don't really feel like they did anything outside of the box. Everything was pretty like pedestrian from a panel perspective. The panel where Storm and Death are dancing and you can see the mermaids behind them, that panel was kind of cool. So you know, some moments like that, but I don't really feel like anything was particularly noteworthy or standout from an art perspective here.
I do like this team's portrayal of Wolverine. Like, I thought he looks good. That struck me, but I did end up walking away the way I think I felt about a lot of these issues, where like you see the cover and I'm just like, can we give Russell Dodderman one of these fucking books already? Like, what the fuck? Russell Dodderman is so good, and like the few times that he's gotten an entire issue, they've been just an absolute treat. And I really just want him on one of these monthlies.
He might be Marvel's best active artist.
I think there's certainly a case to be made there, if not the definitive one. Because like I was not familiar with his work before this era, and like I'm such a fan now. Like, every time it blows me away.
Wasn't he one of the Young Guns a couple of
Yes.
years ago, even though he had a book for 5 years or something before that?
That whole initiative is so funny and silly
Yeah.
at this point. But yes, you're right. Any other thoughts about this book?
Can't wait for stuff to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we're already over halfway done with the actual event, and we have not seen a sword used. And
A
that
goddamn sword.
it's just wild. It's wild.
You know what it was weirdly giving me vibes of was specifically this issue. It reminded me a lot of like the Amalgam era, where there was like the tournament between like the DC and Marvel characters in that one. I forget what the arc was, but like it was very much this kind of vibe where it was like the Tournament of Champions, and I was just like, oh man, I don't know that that's the illusion. I don't know that that's the book you want me to be thinking of.
I don't know. I'm thinking about Mortal Kombat. I'm thinking about all kinds of
Yu Yu
things.
Hakusho.
It'd be cool if there was some combat.
Yeah, right?
At some point, it'll have to happen, right? Right?
Well, what is this? The 14th issue?
13, yeah. 13 chapters in.
Well, it's funny. I was counting it. Like, it has to start because there's going to be 8 fights. So it's like we're running out of issues.
I don't
Bro,
think that
Dragon
the
Ball-
tournament is going to happen like that.
No.
No, I don't think it's going to be like a fight per issue type of thing. I'm not even sure it's going to hold a traditional tournament structure at this point, but
I
that's
don't even know if
all.
it's gonna happen.
Yeah, that's all for the future. We will be back next week to talk about the next installments. We're getting 3 installments of this story next week: Marauders 15, Excalibur 14, Wolverine 7. The
Damn.
event will end this month. Ten of Swords Destruction #1 drops on the 25th, and that's the last issue. So not too long to wait to see how this all wraps up. Let us know your thoughts if you're listening to our reviews. What do you feel about the pace of this event? Do you think it's progressing well, or is it not meeting your expectations? There are plenty of ways you guys can reach out and let us know your thoughts. Of course, you can get us on all podcast hosting platforms. However it is that you listen to us, please make sure that you guys are leaving us a review. They help us out so much. And if you're on YouTube, of course, that does include a subscribe. It's the equivalent. So please go do that. And if you listen to us in one way, consider going and jumping over the other way and hitting us with a subscribe or a rating wherever it is that you don't consume us. It just really helps us out. You can write to us at thecomicspals@gmail.com. You can join our Discord server where we're always having conversations about the books that we review here or any other books. That doesn't have to be what we talk about. You guys drive the narrative over there. So come join us. And of course, listen to our book clubs. We've got Kingdom Come dropping at the end of the month. And we just dropped Swamp Thing and Sandman. So really cool book clubs. Hopefully you guys enjoy some of the more spooky ones that we did for the spookiest of seasons. And, we've got a lot of cool book clubs coming your way. So stay tuned for all of that. Let's get into the plugs. Pete.
Thank you guys for joining us here in another episode of the Comics Pals. If you want to connect with me, I'm @loud_Pete on Twitter and Instagram. Let me know how you are celebrating the inauguration of our new president, Mr. Jay Garrett.
Well, not yet.
Yeah, well.
All right, we got some shenanigans to get through first.
That's true. So if you want to get some more content from me, you can check out the Potscast, the weekly Nintendo podcast that I host over on lootpots.com. Whatever. Just keep up with me on social media. I'm always doing something.
That's a threat.
All right. Cale.
I am not doing anything.
Cool.
But you can find me on Instagram at TotoInTow. You can find my work at CaleWard.com. That's CALEWARD.com. And I don't know. I'm playing Bioshock. Whatever.
All right. Marco.
Great.
You can find me at Mr. Marco Enomoto on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm watching My Hero Academia. I'm like almost done with the 3rd season. So come talk to me about that. And I've been reading all of Concrete, although I think I'm going to switch to some more Adam Strange stuff. I've been in the mood for some like sci-fi Silver Age shit.
Interesting.
Did I tell you I just picked up the director's cut?
Oh, really?
Of issue 1? Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but I did get it. I'm interested
okay.
to see what King's got cooking in on his end.
Yeah.
Can you smell it?
Yeah, that's it for me.
Phil.
I was thinking all this time, how would Canadian Wolverine handle that dinner party? I bet he would have stabbed Saturnine because they didn't serve enough poutine.
Yeah,
Which is a Canadian dish.
No
one
Molsons.
serves enough poutine.
No
No
Molsons at the
Molsons.
table. If you like dumb jokes like that, you can hit me up on Cyborg Bebop on Twitter and Instagram, where I'll field all questions about Canadian Wolverine and how he'll respond to things. Like this election, but he's not even aware of it.
It's Canadian.
Yeah, he's in the woods somewhere.
As for me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram only at Sean Soapbox. I will not be talking about the election, of course, but you can hit me up to talk about whatever it is that you're listening to or watching or playing. I feel like there's so much good stuff happening again in terms of media and entertainment. We got The Mandalorian, which has been really good. I'm still reading House and Powers. I'm playing Bioshock. I'm hating my life because I chose to play The Force Awakens or The Force Unleashed. So lots of stuff going on from that perspective. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining us. We are the Comics Pals signing off. Take care, guys.
See you next week.
Bye.
All right, Marco, we're throwing you off the ship. You were the
Not
imposter.
again!